For generations, humanity has been locked in a brutal, never-ending turf war with underground monsters, and because humans lacked raw physical strength, they were constantly getting pushed to the brink, leaving a lone mage completely cornered by a horde of ugly, bloodthirsty beasts, while the rescue squad desperately rushes in, praying they can make it in time, as a massive beast opens its jaws to swallow the kid whole. But everything changed when the heavens finally decided to throw humanity a bone, unleashing a brand new power that would level the playing field once and for all. This legendary gift of magic, which this kid wields with absolute freezing perfection, instantly turning the entire monster ambush into a collection of beautiful ice sculptures, before casually turning to his shocked rescuers to let them know the threat is already handled. While the rescue squad stares at the pile of dead monsters, wondering if they arrived too late, our boy Ryan is currently getting hit with some seriously unexpected career-ending news, as his party leader calmly explains that while Ryan's magic is undeniably top tier, a dangerous underground raid requires actual teamwork instead of a reckless one-man show. Furious, the kid slams his hands down, declaring he did not learn magic just to play nice, which triggers a sudden flashback to the humble beginnings of his magical journey, back when he was just a clumsy, slow kid who felt completely useless at everything, until a mysterious mentor stepped in to tell him those physical flaws did not matter at all, promising him that magic could make anyone a god as long as they had two working arms. Fast forward 3 years, and despite becoming strong enough to solo entire dungeons, everyone still treats him like a liability. It all started when a sketchy recruiter approached young Ryan, asking if he was the legendary genius, claiming their underground raid party was short-staffed and desperately needed his top-tier magical firepower, leading him straight to a dark dungeon entrance under the guise of a routine monster-slaying mission, while dangling the sweet, irresistible promise of ancient treasure waiting just around the corner. But turns out those greedy adventurers did not actually care about his incredible magical talents at all, planning from the very beginning to use the naive kid as disposable monster bait, leaving him completely abandoned to fight off high-level beasts that were way out of his league. This moment the cowards realized there was no treasure. They vanished into thin air, forcing a bitter, betrayed Ryan to survive the brutal onslaught all on his own. Swearing right then and there to never trust another party member ever again, determined to prove his worth, young Ryan charges straight at a terrifying jackal-headed monster, aiming to force those cowardly adventurers to finally acknowledge his incredible magical power. But a blindingly fast counterattack cuts through the air before he can even react, leaving him completely disoriented on the cold ground, wondering why he is suddenly lying down, only to look over and realize his entire right arm has been cleanly severed, sending him into a state of absolute, paralyzing shock as reality sets in. This towering jackal monster casually commends the kid for dodging a fatal blow to the head, stepping closer to treat this brutal mutilation as a casual chat with a rare human, before curiously asking the bleeding mage to show off his impressive ice magic once more. Instantly realizing the terrified kid is too traumatized to even understand what is happening. Staring down at his remaining hand, Ryan desperately explains that his magic requires two whole arms to cast, which prompts the jackal monster to casually ask why he does not just grow the limb back, screaming back that human biology definitely does not work that way and lost limbs are gone forever, while the towering beast simply stares down at him, processing this brand new piece of information, leaving our boy completely devastated, knowing that a handless mage is essentially a dead mage. Suddenly, a chilling realization seems to wash over the giant monster's face as he listens, as he raises his own clawed hand, finding this whole biological limitation absolutely fascinating, wondering aloud if having 4 arms and twice the fingers would make his own magic twice as strong, instantly sending a wave of pure, unadulterated terror straight through the young mage's soul. Because this terrifying beast now wants to keep Ryan alive just to learn how to cast spells, Keval casually scoops up the protesting mage like a sack of laundry, ignoring his frantic struggles, while Ryan screams at the top of his lungs, demanding to know where he is being taken, only to be carried straight into a massive, hidden underground temple overflowing with ancient treasure chests, leaving the young mage completely stunned by the sheer scale of this secret subterranean sanctuary, which the giant beast proudly claims as his personal home where no pesky humans can ever enter, surprisingly wrapping Ryan's bleeding stump in magical bandages to save his life before demanding his story, prompting our boy to quickly set a bold condition before he agrees to teach any magic, proposing that Keval's unique four-armed biology might actually hold the key to regenerating lost human limbs, demanding that they work together to find a high-level healing spell to restore his severed arm, leaving the towering beast to decide if this magical trade-off is worth helping his tiny new prisoner. Ryan demands Keval's help to find a healing spell and fix his missing arm, secretly planning to teleport his way back to safety the second he is whole again, because returning to the surface as a crippled mage is basically a death sentence, forcing him back to the miserable, useless life he worked so hard to escape. Surprisingly, the giant jackal beast is totally on board with this logical proposal, realizing that healing the kid is the fastest way to witness some real human magic. But then Keval immediately tries to wing it with some highly dangerous experimental spellcasting, prompting a panicked Ryan to shut down the beast's incredibly reckless trial-and-error approach, smugly explaining that mastering magic requires actual brainpower, theory, and endless practice. leaving the giant monster with no choice but to sit down and learn the basics. Relieved that his giant captor is actually listening, Ryan quietly celebrates not getting instantly vaporized, as Keval carefully repeats the basic rules of human magic back to his tiny teacher, confirming that the giant beast has actually grasped the fundamental concepts of spellcasting. Pointing with his remaining hand, the young mage explains how a single five-fingered limb works, showing how a basic five-finger output lets a caster easily levitate a small stone, or even expand its physical size with just a tiny bit of extra focus, because adding more fingers exponentially unlocks higher tiers and entirely new categories of spells. Doing some quick math, Ryan calculates that while one hand yields 30 spell combinations, having 4 arms would unlock an absolutely mind-boggling, galaxy-brained level of magical output, prompting the young mage to quickly find a safe starting point for their training. Keval proudly shows off a massive, magically expanded sandwich, leaving Ryan mourning his ruined lunch, because the giant beast decided to practice his new expansion magic without any permission, arguing that they needed to secure more food for their long training session ahead. But as Ryan stares at the magically altered meal, a sudden realization hits him. Noticing that the expanded sandwich has not lost any of its original flavor or density, which means Keval's raw magical output is actually far more precise than he let on, prompting the giant beast to pause and carefully analyze his own incredible magical success. Suddenly, the terrifying monster looks down and gently reminds the kid he is not alone anymore, offering his own massive arms and raw power to help the crippled mage rebuild his life, leaving Ryan to wonder if partnering with a giant monster is actually his best option. Keval holds up a slab of processed meat, wondering if it can regenerate Ryan's missing arm. Realization hits the giant beast that they need a proper biological catalyst to make it work, so he sends his tiny, round minions waddling off to scavenge for useful materials, leaving Ryan highly skeptical about whether these brainless little blobs actually understood their mission. Undeterred, Keval suggests they just experiment on the processed meat in the meantime, but decides that filling their stomachs is a much higher priority right now. Happily devouring the massive meal, the giant beast takes a well-deserved break, while Ryan drafts a complex spell combining plant growth and blood clotting theories, just as Keval returns to check on his tiny teacher's magical progress. Right on cue, the minions return carrying a massive skeleton bone to test their new theory. With a sudden explosive burst of magical energy, the training session officially kicks into high gear, as Keval casually carries Ryan around while a weird, chubby cat monster slides past them, leaving the young mage to cross off another failed spell formula from his growing list. But he refuses to give up, focusing his remaining hand to make a book float, because none of these minor setbacks actually matter when he can still conjure deadly projectiles. Realizing that teaching the giant beast has actually forced his own magical precision to skyrocket, fueling his burning desire to heal his arm and show those surface dwellers his true power. Suddenly, one of Keval's tiny round minions trips over a book, breaking the tense silence, prompting the giant jackal beast to head toward the exit to investigate a strange noise, while sternly warning his tiny human captive to stay put and not move an inch. While Ryan is busy cuddling one of the adorable black minions in his hand, Keval immediately spots the uninvited guest lurking right at the edge of his territory, revealing a creepy, hyperactive jester monster named Jolly who is absolutely thrilled to find him, cheerfully admitting that she fully expected the giant jackal beast to be dead by now, prompting Keval to coldly order her to get lost and stay out of his home. But the annoying jester completely ignores his threats, playfully whining about her long journey, teasingly claiming she only came because she was worried about her supposedly weaker friend, before her playful expression suddenly shifts into a terrifying, dead-eyed stare of pure suspicion, as she recalls the young mage's bold proposal to teach Keval his high-level magic, curiously wondering if the giant beast has finally found himself a brand new human toy. Keval's eyes widen in sudden realization as a wild, desperate plan begins forming in Ryan's mind, because the young mage suddenly remembers that certain high-level monsters are actually capable of casting advanced magic, prompting Ryan to instantly tackle the annoying jester to the ground before she can even react, leaving Jolly completely stunned to find a random, aggressive human hiding out in Keval's secret sanctuary. Pointing his remaining hand directly at her face, our boy fiercely threatens to blow her head off, which immediately sends the dramatic clown into a hilarious, tearful spiral of pure exaggerated terror, only for Jolly to instantly drop the act, smugly revealing she was just kidding all along. As she effortlessly floats away while humming a cheerful tune, completely ignoring his desperate threats, she pauses to look back with a sigh, completely unimpressed by the young mage's aggressive demands. Just as Keval casually scoops Ryan up, complaining that his tiny captive let the intruder escape, Ryan's eyes widen in sheer disbelief, wondering how this mess is somehow his fault, especially since Keval had explicitly warned the annoying jester to stay away from his home, while Jolly casually suggests that the giant beast should have just slaughtered the kid for dinner, prompting Keval to firmly assert his absolute authority over his own territory and his captive, leaving the playful clown to cheerfully wave goodbye while begging for any leftover human blood. Slumped over the giant beast's shoulder, our boy can barely process his narrow escape, his mind racing as the harsh reality of this brutal underground world sinks in, realizing that his survival depends entirely on the whims of these terrifying monsters. Turning on his heel, Keval takes a heavy step forward and delivers a grim warning. telling the young mage that staying in this dangerous sanctuary is no longer an option. Keval admits that keeping a human around was just a selfish whim of his, warning Ryan to head back to the surface before other monsters catch his scent, leaving our boy to quietly process this sudden and incredibly heartbreaking eviction notice, because returning to the surface now means giving up on his dreams forever, prompting the giant jackal beast to suddenly pause in his tracks as he feels a sudden tug. As Ryan desperately grabs hold of his massive companion's cloak with his remaining hand, bitterly pointing out that magic might just be a fun little hobby for someone already powerful. But for a crippled mage, mastering these spells is his absolute last lifeline, refusing to let their incredible training progress go to waste over a little danger, which finally forces the giant beast to stop and reconsider his harsh decision. Keval admits he is actually pretty reluctant to break his promise and kick the kid out, but what he absolutely cannot accept is Ryan ending up dead in this wasteland, explaining that keeping him here is just putting his fragile human life in constant danger, leaving our boy completely speechless as he stares at his giant, surprisingly caring protector, until Jolly suddenly pops back in, cheerfully offering to solve their little dilemma by murdering Ryan herself, pointing out that since Keval is too soft to do the deed, she will gladly take over, forcing the young mage to realize he stands absolutely zero chance against this psycho clown, desperately racking his brain to find some kind of magical loophole to save his skin. When Keval's massive shadow looms over him, asking if he is overthinking things again, sadly our boy has to admit that his brilliant tactical mind has completely run out of ideas. Jolly pops right back into the picture with a massive, unsettling grin on her face, as a barrage of sharp, magical projectiles suddenly rains down from the ceiling. But Keval quickly steps in front of Ryan, suggesting they take down the psycho clown together. Our boy suddenly realizes he does not have to carry the weight of survival all on his own, especially since his giant, fluffy protector is actively asking for his help, prompting Ryan to flash a confident grin and enthusiastically agree to their new tag team alliance. Meanwhile, Jolly starts throwing a massive theatrical tantrum about Keval being brainwashed by a mere human, dramatically whining about how much it absolutely pains her to do what comes next, before her face twists into a bloodthirsty sneer as she decides to just slaughter them both, leaving Ryan to quickly analyze his opponent, knowing that underground clowns are top-tier magic users. Jolly summons a floating arsenal of magical guns, laughing maniacally as she prepares to fire, leaving Ryan completely stunned by the sheer speed of her terrifying magical assault. But Keval quickly scoops up our boy and dashes away to dodge the incoming barrage, prompting the young mage to aim his remaining hand and fire a counterspell right back, only for the psycho clown to smugly mock his weak attack without even trying to dodge, as she effortlessly dances through the air, completely outmaneuvering their coordinated team efforts. Before deciding to shift her focus and eliminate the giant jackal beast first, she conjures a massive, blinding orb of light to counter Keval's annoying agility, exploiting his natural weakness to bright light and leaving him completely defenseless, while she drools with pure bloodthirsty hunger, eager to devour them both right on the spot. Jolly's smug grin instantly vanishes as she notices something bizarre happening right beneath her feet, looking down to find a giant, magically expanded sheet of paper covered in complex scribbles, realizing too late that the duo used Keval's expansion magic as a cheap stalling tactic, driving the furious clown to dive straight back down to tear them both to shreds, only to find Ryan standing ready with a massive, blinding sphere of concentrated magical energy, leaving Jolly completely paralyzed with shock at the sheer, impossible volume of raw power, as our boy flashes a smug grin, knowing their combined forces are completely unstoppable, while Keval channels his own immense strength to perfectly manifest whatever spell they can imagine, unleashing a colossal, blinding beam of destructive magic that completely obliterates everything in its path. Exhausted but victorious, the unlikely duo collapses to the ground, realizing their crazy plan actually worked. Keval is genuinely shocked by their incredible power, wondering when they even practiced such a combo, while his tiny black minions sweat in the background, realizing the entire attack was completely improvised. But Ryan just looks back with a quiet, thoughtful expression on his face, as the giant jackal beast proudly claims he never doubted their success for a single second, leaving our boy to smile warmly, realizing that magic is still endlessly fascinating to him, glad that he got to witness something truly remarkable before his journey here comes to an end, only to suddenly snap out of it and demand to know what Keval means by the end, since the massive commotion they just caused will inevitably draw other dangerous monsters to their scent, proving that humans and beasts simply belong in different worlds and must walk separate paths. Yet deep down, the giant beast secretly wishes that was not the absolute truth. Ryan points out that being separated from his friends is already bad enough, but dealing with a giant, overly polite jackal beast is somehow even weirder, leaving Keval completely speechless as he processes the kid's blunt, sarcastic honesty. Because honestly, who else would kidnap a human just to learn high-level magic, except for an absolute oddball who is just as crazy as the beast himself? Keval cannot help but chuckle at the young mage's sheer, unadulterated confidence, before his tone turns dead serious, asking Ryan what he actually knows about him, warning the young mage that he might be rushing into a very dangerous partnership, especially once he finally hears the dark, tragic truth about the beast's past. Ultimately, Keval agrees to be his partner until their food supplies completely run out. Ryan's confident smile instantly evaporates as he remembers a tiny, crucial detail about their food supply. Turns out, they do not have nearly enough rations to survive a long-term partnership. Meanwhile, deep within the shadows of the 10th layer, heavy claws scrape against the stone floor, as a bitter monster grumbles about how humans ruined their plans to rule the surface world, while his pathetic underlings scramble around in a panic because they are running low on firewood. Bowing in absolute terror, a subordinate begs for forgiveness from their wounded leader, Lord Rajua, who vows to burn every single human to ashes the moment his injuries finally heal, before his sharp gaze shifts to the newly arrived messenger standing at the chamber entrance, asking the masked scout for his regular report on any human intruders wandering through their territory, only for the loyal scout to calmly lie straight to his face with a flat zero. Lord Rajua grumbles about wanting to taste human flesh again, completely oblivious to his scout's secret agenda. Casually remarking on how delicious humans are, the beast notes that his loyal scout does not even eat meat. But his sharp eyes suddenly lock onto a fresh, bandaged wound on Kevil's arm, raising immediate suspicion, leaving the giant jackal scrambling for a quick excuse to cover up his recent battle scars. As the suspicious overlord leans in closer to take a deep, telling sniff of the air, instantly detecting a very familiar, highly offensive scent lingering all over his supposedly loyal messenger, while the terrified minions sweat bullets in the background, hoping their boss is just imagining things. This furious leader realizes a human has actually dared to trespass directly into his underground territory, unleashing a wave of pure, fiery rage that threatens to burn the entire cavern to ashes. Before ordering Kevil to hunt down the intruder, completely unaware he just sent the kid's own protector, Lord Rajua drools at the thought of turning the human intruder into his next meal, while his terrified underlings panic about how a human presence threatens their entire underground sanctuary, prompting Kevil to quickly interject, claiming he already searched the area and found absolutely nothing. Casually dismissing the boss's sharp senses as nothing more than paranoid, hate-fueled delusions. Unfortunately, the fiery overlord is not buying the excuse and issues a direct, chilling threat, bringing up Kevil's sister who is currently out in the wild gathering herbs, and suggesting that she might make a perfectly suitable replacement dinner instead. This cruel boss notes that while a beast will not taste as good, it beats going hungry, forcing the jackal scout to swallow his rage and politely excuse himself from the chamber, muttering that he has far better things to do than stand around humoring garbage jokes. Lord Rajua watches him leave with a deeply unsettling, highly suspicious chuckle. Walking away, Kevil sighs heavily as he wonders if his terrible poker face gave him away. Sniffing his bandages, he realizes he has become completely nose-blind to Ryan's human scent, reminding himself of their secret deal to trade healing services for forbidden human magic. Because to a knowledge-obsessed beast, a little cross-species cooperation is a very small price to pay, and he will gladly obliterate anyone who dares to get in their way. But with the fiery overlord actively sniffing around, their peaceful training days are officially over. Suddenly, the giant jackal stops in his tracks as he spots something on the ground, staring down at a pile of scattered minotaur bones left behind in the cavern, before realizing he no longer needs to scavenge for cheap magical catalysts anymore. Kevil realizes he needs to escape this dangerous situation before his family gets dragged into the crossfire, because at the end of the day, Ryan is still a human and their natural enemy, meaning their temporary alliance is built on a very shaky foundation of mutual convenience. But for now, the giant jackal beast quietly makes his way back to their hideout, finding our boy sitting on the floor, completely absorbed in his magical research, as Kevil silently watches him, wondering how long this fragile piece can actually last, while Ryan mutters to himself, seemingly on the verge of cracking a major magical breakthrough, until a dark, clawed hand slowly reaches out from behind to interrupt his deep thoughts. Fortunately, it is just a friendly pat on the shoulder from his giant, fluffy protector, who casually claims he was just doing rounds, keeping his dangerous encounter with the Overlord a complete secret. This tiny black minion chimes in, asking our boy what exactly is occupying his thoughts. Ryan points toward the massive, magically enlarged sandwich sitting right in front of them, noting with genuine confusion that the food has not rotted a single bit in a whole week. Kevil strokes his chin in agreement, realizing that human magic has some seriously bizarre preservation properties, prompting the young mage to ask if there is a specific spell he wants to test, offering the giant jackal a rare chance to experiment with any human magic he desires. Our giant friend looks completely taken aback, realizing the kid is offering to teach him directly, leaving Kevil to hesitate for a moment as he carefully considers his options. While Ryan flashes a warm, encouraging smile, assuring his fluffy protector that lessons are completely free. Finally, the giant jackal looks down and asks if there is a spell that can put someone to sleep. Ryan beams and confirms that human magic has the perfect spell, calling it lullaby magic, as he begins demonstrating the exact hand movements to his giant, fluffy companion, while the tiny black minion holds the spell scroll, sweating under the sudden pressure, prompting Ryan to ask if Kevil said something, though the giant beast quickly denies it, realizing that activating this formula will instantly put whoever is standing in front of him to sleep, which Ryan nervously confirms, though he tries to add a very important warning. But Kevil is already looming over him, completely ready to test the spell right now. Our boy instantly panics and begs him to wait, but the giant jackal tells him not to worry, casually promising that he will wake the young mage up immediately after the test, leaving Ryan screaming in absolute terror because that is definitely not how sleep spells work. A sudden violent magical explosion blasts Ryan backward, leaving him completely dazed and confused, while Keval stares at the freshly shattered stone wall, wondering how this counts as sleep magic, prompting our boy to collapse onto the floor in utter defeat, realizing their research is totally ruined. This giant jackal tilts his head in confusion, completely lost by the kid's sudden despair, as Ryan explains that beast magic operates on a completely different wavelength than human spells, which perfectly explains why their magically preserved sandwich turned into a bizarre, mutated abomination, since human magic relies on precise hand gestures that beasts simply cannot replicate with 4 arms. Trying to combine different elemental formulas like plant growth and blood clotting was always a long shot, but even though species-specific magic makes logical sense, our young mage refuses to give up just yet, staring ahead with a sudden, intense spark of determination as a wild new theory crosses his mind. Ryan clutches his head in absolute disbelief, screaming about why he had to endure a second explosion, while Keval casually blames his clumsy fingers for misfiring another dangerous spell directly at his face, leaving the giant jackal to calmly accept that human sleep magic is simply too lethal for him, which only makes our boy stare up from the floor with a deeply suspicious, exhausted look, demanding to know what exactly his fluffy companion means by calling this near-death experience unfortunate. Ryan points out that the giant beast has been acting incredibly strange ever since he returned, reminding him that he used to find absolute, childlike joy in experimenting with any kind of magic, so acting all gloomy and disappointed over a failed spell is completely out of character. Keval quickly claims he was only trying to help the exhausted young mage get some peaceful rest, but our young mage is not buying that incredibly weak, highly suspicious excuse for a single second. Ryan's eye twitches as he realizes his body is physically refusing to cooperate, leaving our boy staring down in absolute shock as his knees suddenly buckle beneath him, because Keval calmly points out that the kid has officially hit his absolute physical limit. This giant jackal notes that Ryan has spent days obsessively studying without getting any proper rest, especially after burning through massive amounts of mana during his chaotic battle with that creepy clown, suggesting that a quick nap might actually help him think of better magical formulas. But our stubborn young mage snaps back, insisting that their conversation is far from over, prompting the giant beast to cross his arms and ask if his explanation was not satisfying enough, as Keval's claws flinch while he silently admits to himself that he is terrible at lying, while Ryan demands to know what secret has his giant companion so incredibly stressed out. Ryan looks up at his giant companion, pleading with him to finally share his heavy burden, insisting that no matter how impossible or difficult a problem might seem to tackle alone, they can easily solve any crisis as long as they stick together as a team. Our boy challenges the giant beast, asking if he still believes they belong in completely different worlds. But before Keval can even formulate a response, Ryan's exhausted body suddenly gives out, sending the young mage collapsing face first straight toward the cold stone floor, landing with a heavy thud as his extreme exhaustion finally catches up to him. Meanwhile, the tiny black minion panics as he watches their human ally pass out cold, while Keval looms over his sleeping friend, quietly admitting that he used to think the same way, gently lifting the unconscious kid while whispering a quiet apology for what he must do next. Looking down at the unconscious kid, Keval sighs that Ryan really should have returned to the surface, slowly extending his sharp, dark claws directly toward our boy's defenseless head. This giant jackal hesitates as he prepares to make a highly questionable move, before hoisting the sleeping mage onto his back, leaving the tiny minion completely bewildered. But before they can even take a single step towards safety, a sudden tremor shakes the cavern, prompting the giant beast to freeze in terror as the entire hideout begins to violently rumble, as massive cracks rapidly spread across the stone walls, signaling an incredibly unwelcome guest. Suddenly, the fiery overlord himself bursts straight through the solid rock in a spectacular display of property damage, flashing a deeply unsettling, toothy grin as he corners his supposedly loyal scout, casually announcing that he just decided to drop by for a totally normal, friendly little stroll. Keval freezes as he spots a familiar face caught in the overlord's grasp. Turns out the fiery boss is holding Keval's little sister hostage with his tail, while casually dangling our unconscious boy in the air like a piece of cheap trash. Staring at the terrifying scene, the giant jackal tries to keep his absolute panic in check, demanding that Lord Rajua release his sister immediately before they negotiate any further. Surprisingly, the massive lion beast agrees, claiming he has no interest in keeping her anyway, letting the terrified little cat run straight into her brother's protective, bandaged arms, though Keval remains completely silent, knowing this sudden generosity comes with a massive catch, because the fiery overlord is still holding Ryan, complaining that the kid is barely a snack. Lord Rajua roars in disappointment, leaving our heroes completely cornered by his overwhelming, terrifying power. Keval's little sister trembles in fear, clutching tightly to her brother's bandaged arm, looking up with wide, tearful eyes as she realizes the terrifying danger they are in, while the fiery overlord takes a massive, heavy step forward, crushing the stone floor beneath his claws. Lord Rajua suddenly strikes with blinding speed, his massive fist sending a shockwave through the cavern, leaving the tiny black minion to watch in absolute horror as the dust clears, while Keval's eyes widen in sheer panic as he barely registers the devastating blow. screaming out for his brother as the sheer force of the impact echoes through the hideout. This giant jackal lies completely flattened on the ground, groaning in pain under the Overlord's massive weight, while Lord Rajua glares down at his fallen scout, demanding to know if he truly understands his betrayal, leaving Keval to desperately try and play dumb, hoping to protect his sister and our sleeping boy. Keval's little sister cowers on the ground beside the tiny minion as the Overlord speaks. This fiery tyrant prepares to reveal his true, twisted nature to his captive audience. Meanwhile, our boy remains completely knocked out, blissfully unaware of the deadly conversation happening nearby. Even the tiny black minion lies defeated on the stone floor, completely out of options. Lord Rajua narrows his glowing, predatory eye, dismissing any foolish notions of mercy or negotiation. Mocking his captive scout, the massive lion beast prepares to burn them all to ash. This tiny black minion can only watch in absolute terror as the temperature rapidly rises, but a sudden, sharp cracking sound echoes through the cavern, interrupting the Overlord's deadly threat, leaving the fiery tyrant completely stunned as he feels a sudden shift in the air. Our boy slowly stands up, surrounded by a mysterious, swirling aura of pure magical energy. Lord Rajua looks down in mild amusement, surprised to see the exhausted human standing up already. This massive lion beast dismisses him, warning the kid that the adults are talking. But Ryan is not in the mood for threats, telling the fiery tyrant to shut his mouth. Boldly pointing a finger, our boy demands that the giant furball step away from his friend. This ridiculous demand only makes the massive Overlord burst into a fit of hysterical laughter. Mocking the kid's sudden bravery, the fiery beast promises to savor chewing him up slowly. Unfazed by the threat, our boy raises his hand to repeat his very clear warning, unleashing a sudden blinding magical strike that catches the arrogant Overlord completely off guard. Even the giant jackal can only grunt in surprise at the kid's sheer audacity, wondering how the completely drained young mage still has enough energy to stand and fight. Ryan knows better than anyone that he is pushing his exhausted body way past its absolute limit. But watching his giant companion get insulted and threatened with death makes his blood boil, leaving our stubborn young mage completely unable to just sit back and do absolutely nothing, because he refuses to be the kind of massive idiot who abandons a loyal friend. Hearing this, the injured jackal can only smile, quietly calling the kid a total eccentric, which Ryan happily accepts with a smirk, noting they make a pretty perfect team anyway. While the fiery Overlord watches their little bonding moment with a deeply amused expression, suddenly Lord Rajua lets out a low rumble as his blazing aura begins to flare up, accusing his scout of plotting to team up with the human to assassinate him, prompting our boy to look completely dumbfounded by the tyrant's wildly dramatic, highly inaccurate conspiracy theory. Lord Rajua is clearly jumping to conclusions, but honestly that is exactly how this is going to end, leaving both Ryan and Keval to lock eyes with a shared, unspoken understanding of the situation. As the young mage steps forward, shielding his giant companion from the tyrant's overwhelming presence, Ryan smugly points out that he read all about the infamous blazing lion in a book, specifically mentioning the part where the mighty Overlord got absolutely wrecked by a human magician, which instantly makes the fiery tyrant flinch in pure, unadulterated embarrassment and rage. Flipping through his magical tome, our boy casually suggests he might as well claim that massive bounty, immediately chanting a high-tier wind spell to summon a swirling vortex of razor-sharp gale force, unleashing a massive crystalline bird of pure magical energy to strike down the arrogant beast, leaving the fiery Overlord staring in absolute, wide-eyed shock as the devastating attack closes in. This fiery tyrant roars as the massive wind strike crashes directly into his face. But Ryan's eyes widen in confusion as the Overlord casually dismisses the attack as a total disappointment, declaring that the kid's magic is not even worth eating before telling him to disappear. Our boy quickly processes the insult, realizing his flashy spell was actually just a massive bluff, which means his desperate little distraction actually worked exactly the way he planned, leaving the fiery tyrant to suddenly realize he fell for a classic bait-and-switch. As Keval suddenly lunges from the shadows to strike the distracted boss from behind, though the massive lion beast easily blocks the blow, boasting that their puny attacks can never reach him, this giant jackal calmly agrees that his physical claws might not be able to touch him, before unleashing a powerful sleep spell to put the fiery Overlord down for a very long nap. This sleep spell hits Lord Rajua directly, his eyes widening in shock as the magic takes hold. This fiery Overlord groans in disbelief, completely unable to resist the sudden, overwhelming drowsiness, leaving Ryan to stare in absolute awe as the massive tyrant actually begins to stumble. Keval wastes no time celebrating, quickly scooping up our boy to make a swift escape, suggesting they hit the road before their giant, sleepy target decides to wake up, which Ryan fully agrees with, flashing a tired but highly satisfied grin at their success. Suddenly, the giant jackal hoists our young mage up like a sack of potatoes, while Lord Rajua collapses heavily onto the stone floor, cursing his own sudden weakness, his heavy eyelids fluttering shut as the powerful sleep magic completely takes over. Looking back, the escaping duo leaves the shrunken, sleeping tyrant far behind in the dust. This sleepy tyrant cannot believe he is losing to a couple of absolute nobodies. But our boy just grins back, asking if the big kitty wants to test that theory, prompting the furious overlord to let out one last desperate, ear-splitting roar of rage, as the escaping duo uses the distraction to put some serious distance between them. Turns out the sleep spell is not holding, and the tyrant's booming laughter echoes once more. Forcing his heavy eyes open, he asks if that was really their best shot, his massive claws digging deep into the stone floor as his power surges back, promising with absolute bloodshot fury that he will personally tear them to shreds. But before the raging lion can strike, a mysterious voice notes how far he has fallen, leaving Kevel to slide to a halt as the entire cavern suddenly grows deathly quiet. Kevel takes a moment to assess their escape route, realizing they might actually pull this off, noting that the collapsed cavern floor will prevent the angry lion from easily chasing them, which means the unstable ground actually worked in their favor for once. But instead of celebrating, the giant jackal looks down and solemnly offers Ryan a sincere apology, admitting that he originally used our boy as bait just to keep his little sister safe, prompting a sudden, incredibly loud outburst of pure confusion from the young mage. This unexpected reaction catches the giant beast completely off guard, leaving him totally speechless, as Ryan angrily demands to know why his companion kept such a massive secret from him, reminding the giant jackal that he was the one who taught him not to fight alone, leaving Kevel staring in stunned silence as the kid's words hit him right in the feels. Ryan casually points out that using him as bait would have worked way better as an actual plan, demanding that next time the giant jackal keeps him in the loop from the very beginning, offering his hand to his giant companion as a sign of their newly forged trust, flashing a bright, confident smile while declaring that they can conquer absolutely anything as a team. Kevel can only let out a soft chuckle, deeply touched by the young mage's relentless optimism, noting that our boy really is one of the most eccentric humans he has ever met, firmly shaking the kid's hand while offering a sincere, quiet word of gratitude for his help. But their wholesome bonding moment is suddenly interrupted by a timid, quiet voice from behind, as Kevel's little sister steps forward, staring at our young mage with wide, curious eyes, wondering why a surface-dwelling human is down here risking his life for her brother. Kevel's sister is completely bewildered by the chaotic situation, throwing her hands up in frustration, while Kevel looks back at her with a helpless shrug, admitting he has no idea either. But first, he gently cradles our completely exhausted boy, asking his sister to prepare a bed, deciding that now is the perfect time to finally explain everything about his mysterious past, as Ryan peacefully snores away, totally oblivious to the heavy emotional backstory about to unfold. Carrying our sleeping hero, the giant jackal leads his sister deeper into their hidden sanctuary, flashing back to a peaceful human village where a group of kids are playing pretend, with a young, energetic boy waving a wooden stick and shouting out a flashy water spell, prompting his playmate wearing a paper crown to dramatically fall backward, pretending to be defeated, celebrating their imaginary victory as the next group of kids prepares to take their turn. A young boy with dark hair turns around, hearing the distant laughter of the other kids, wondering what exactly is going on over there to cause such a massive scene, only to get stopped dead in his tracks by a harsh, unwelcoming voice, as the local kids mockingly tell young Ryan to get lost because he is too weak, whispering behind his back about how he is just a slow, moping kid from another village, leaving our young hero to watch from a distance as they play their exclusive games, before he quietly turns away and heads back toward his family's dining tavern, where his parents warmly welcome him back, asking if he is finally done playing outside, prompting a quiet, sullen response from the boy as he slinks past them, leaving his mother and father to exchange a deeply concerned, silent look of worry. Ryan's dad tries to cheer him up by asking for help with the weekend market shopping, but our stubborn boy immediately shuts him down, refusing to leave the house at all, muttering that his parents can easily handle the busy tavern chores without his useless help, deciding that staying inside to watch the empty house is his only real contribution, until a loud, energetic woman suddenly bursts through the front door with a booming greeting, frantically asking if their family tavern happens to stock a rare bottle of CeeLo wine, which Ryan's dad happily confirms, sending the desperate customer into a state of pure ecstatic joy, as she celebrates finally tracking down her favorite drink after a long, exhausting search. Watching her chug the wine, our young hero can only stare in absolute judgmental bewilderment, before another stranger suddenly kicks the door open, demanding to know where she has been. Ryan's dad stares in absolute disbelief as a legendary name suddenly clicks in his head, realizing this chaotic, wine-chugging lady is actually the world-renowned magician Jean Seraphi, whose annoyed companion sighs, pointing out they have a serious investigation to run tonight, which she casually dismisses with a wave, leaving the tavern owners questioning her credentials, as the locals wonder why a high-tier mage is investigating the aftermath of the war, until the tavern keeper mentions that the blazing lion's rampage completely destroyed the local orchards, prompting Jean to slam her hands down in pure horror over the fate of the grapes. Turns out the devastating fire means wine production will not stabilize for several years, sending the legendary magician into a state of absolute lightning-fueled existential dread. Before she gets a brilliant, highly illegal idea to use growth magic to bypass nature, Jean realizes she cannot pull off this massive botanical heist entirely on her own, so she immediately calls out to stop the sullen kid right in his tracks, locking her sharp, chaotic gaze onto him with an intensity that screams trouble, leaving young Ryan completely frozen in place as his survival instincts kick in. before she casually asks if he wants to help her build a brand new vineyard. This kid can only blink in absolute brain-melting confusion at the bizarre offer, but she suddenly grabs his hands, declaring they're perfectly built for casting spells, proudly announcing to his stunned parents that their son is a natural-born magical prodigy. Our boy cannot believe his ears, wondering how someone as weak as him could ever do magic. Until she suddenly shoves a massive, heavy spellbook right into his face. She hands over a plain-looking notebook, proudly calling it her personal, highly exclusive magic guide, boasting that she summarized all her legendary knowledge perfectly just for him to read, leaving the bewildered kid holding the book as she casually mentions she is staying for a week, before she happily skips out the door, reminding his parents to save her more wine tomorrow. Standing alone in the quiet tavern, our young boy stares at the book in absolute disbelief, knowing that legendary magicians are celebrated worldwide as the ultimate saviors of humanity, a grand, heroic title that feels like the absolute furthest thing from his own reality. Tucking himself under the heavy blankets, he tries to block out the chaotic events of the day, but his eyes suddenly snap wide open as sleep completely eludes his restless mind, prompting him to quietly slip out of bed to investigate that mysterious notebook after all. Staring wide-eyed in the dark, the kid decides he will take just a quick peek, telling himself he will close the book the second his eyes start getting heavy. But the very first page reveals that magic was actually named by Jean herself, explaining how humans can channel nature's elements simply by forming formulas with their fingers, which means bending different fingers can yield over 1,000 unique magical combinations. Suddenly, a strange, warm sensation washes over him, making him feel completely weightless, as the room dissolves into a swirling dreamscape of floating pages and ancient spells, prompting the kid to test out a basic levitation trick on a nearby pencil, until Jean suddenly bursts through the door, shattering his concentration and dropping the pencil, leaving the legendary mage to grin, fully aware that her newest student is hooked. This lead pushes forward as the conflict keeps escalating. Tension builds as the stakes grow higher. This moment shifts and the balance tips. Something changes in the air between them. This scene holds, then moves on. Conflict simmers beneath the surface. He holds his ground as the situation unfolds. She takes a step and the dynamic shifts. This next beat of the story lands. This pressure rises as the dangerous clash keeps escalating. Ryan's parents notice their son has been acting incredibly strange since yesterday morning, prompting a regular customer to point out how surprisingly studious the kid has suddenly become, who is completely ignoring the bustling tavern sounds and even leaving his favorite sandwich untouched, as our young hero remains lost in his own world, utterly consumed by the mysterious notebook. While the adults gossip about the sudden influx of powerful warriors visiting their town, meanwhile, Ryan's eyes dart across the pages as he absorbs every single detail of the text, stopping on a basic spell formula designed to accelerate the growth of simple garden plants, deciding to step outside and awkwardly twist his fingers into the required magical shape, only to stare in disappointment at a tiny sprout that refuses to budge even an inch, leaving him to wonder what went wrong as he struggles to grasp the concept of imagination. Jean casually lounges on a pile of wood, telling the annoyed kid to listen to his senior's advice. She explains the ultimate secret of magic is simply visualizing the exact end result in your mind, flashing a knowing smirk while pointing out that raw technique will only get him so far, declaring that true magic boils down to whether he can genuinely believe in his own success. Our boy processes this, realizing he must picture the fully grown plant instead of just wishing for it. Closing his eyes, Ryan takes a deep breath and focuses every ounce of his mental energy, vividly imagining a strong, healthy sprout bursting forth from the dry soil in front of him, before he suddenly snaps his eyes open and thrusts his fingers forward to trigger the spell, leaving a tense silence in the air until a tiny green leaf suddenly begins to twitch, shooting upward into a fully grown plant that leaves our young prodigy absolutely stunned by his success. Jean beams with pride, praising Ryan for picking up the basics so incredibly fast, prompting our young hero to stare down at his hands in absolute wide-eyed wonder. But as she tries to explain a vertical hand-stacking technique, she realizes he is completely zoned out, prompting her to casually wave goodbye, telling him to head home before it gets too dark. Though her playful smile quickly shifts into a highly competitive, determined smirk, as she mutters that she absolutely cannot let herself get outdone by a literal child. Meanwhile, Ryan sits quietly in the woods, completely lost in his reading at the edge of town, staring down at the notebook with a heavy sigh, realizing his one-week deadline is up tomorrow, until a sudden rustling sound in the bushes alerts him that his chaotic mentor is back, leaving our boy to awkwardly ask if she is actually doing any real work today. Ryan's eyes widen in sheer panic as a shadow suddenly looms over him, revealing the local bullies have tracked him down to his quiet forest hiding spot, leaving our boy scrambling backward while desperately trying to hide Jean's precious notebook. But the lead bully snatches it away with a smug, mocking sneer, demanding to know if a weakling like him actually thinks he can become a magician. Our hero tries to protest, but his trembling voice is instantly cut off, as the bullies aggressively shove him down into the dirt without a second thought, reminding him that a useless kid from another village has zero right to dream big, while they gleefully prepare to beat him up just to keep him in his place. Frozen in absolute terror, the helpless kid watches his fragile dream fall apart. A heavy boot suddenly stomps onto the dusty ground with a sharp, frustrated sigh, Jean grumbles about her failed search, deciding she will just have to try again tonight. But her eyes suddenly widen in shock as she spots the beaten kid nearby, walking over to find Ryan curled up in an alley covered in fresh bruises, prompting her to casually ask if he is just taking a quick break, only for the boy to mutter that learning magic is completely impossible for him, listing all his physical flaws while believing he is simply too weak to succeed. Until Jean crouches down with a bright smile, cutting off his self-pity instantly. She cheerfully explains that magic only requires 2 working arms to make anything possible, leaving our bruised hero to wonder if he can truly overcome his own limitations. Ryan looks down, admitting he simply cannot picture himself ever becoming a real magician, believing other kids are far more suited for greatness than a weakling like him, prompting Jean to sigh in disappointment, agreeing that his lack of confidence is a real shame, before she suddenly raises her hands, forming a complex spell to bid him a final farewell. Our boy flinches in sheer panic, instantly recognizing the dangerous hand signs she is weaving, raising his own hand to mimic the counterspell while trembling in the dark alleyway. He nervously asks why she is not activating the memory-wiping spell she just prepared, leaving the legendary mage to marvel at how easily he identified her forgetting magic, pointing out that decoding one specific spell out of 1,000 is normally impossible for beginners. Yet Ryan did it instantly, forcing him to wonder where his hidden talent actually comes from. Our young hero can only blink in sheer confusion, wondering how he could possibly have talent. But Jean leans in close, declaring his success is simply the result of his relentless hard work, insisting there is absolutely no reason to listen to critics who have never witnessed his struggles, pointing out that his inability to picture himself as a mage is just a lack of trying, before locking her sharp gaze onto him, delivering a crucial piece of advice to young Ryan, telling him he must constantly visualize himself standing proudly at the very peak of magical mastery, warning that letting self-doubt creep in will only freeze his progress and hold him back forever. By simply mastering his own mind and fully believing in his potential, she promises there is absolutely nothing in this world he will not be able to achieve. Clenching his fists tightly, the kid feels a sudden spark of determination ignite deep within him. Ryan suddenly snaps out of a deep, nostalgic daydream about meeting his master 3 years ago, only to find himself being carried away by his masked companion who asks if he is finally awake, prompting our boy to quickly shake off his grogginess and assess the chaotic situation, realizing they are currently in the middle of a high-speed escape from a furious dragon-like monster, leaving the masked runner to calmly offer a quick mid-sprint explanation of their current crisis, explaining that their recent victory over the weakened monster leader, Rajua, has triggered total chaos, because taking down the big boss naturally did not sit well with the local beast population, sending the entire surrounding horde into a wild, highly agitated state of pure rage. While they manage to lose most of the pack, Rajua's loyal right-hand man is still hot on their heels, screaming that Keval has committed ultimate treason against the monster world by betraying his own kind. Keval grumbles that he is completely sick of hearing about monster politics, turning his attention back to Ryan to ask what his next move is, offering the kid a golden opportunity to escape back to the safe surface right now. But Keval warns that simply running away or defeating this pursuer will not solve their problems, because the big boss Rajua is still breathing and nursing a massive grudge, meaning a quiet escape is possible now, but a future ambush is practically guaranteed, especially since the surface world falsely believes the beast was permanently slain 3 years ago, leaving our young hero to process this terrifying reality with a tense, silent gasp, before Ryan firmly declares that they have no choice but to stand and fight, since letting the monster roam free means putting the entire human world in extreme danger. Ryan declares with absolute certainty that they are going to completely destroy the blazing lion Rajua, leaving their little black cat companion completely stunned by the kid's sudden burst of insane confidence, while Keval quietly listens from behind, wondering what kind of crazy plan the boy would pitch, only to instantly beam with pride and praise Ryan for showing some real warrior spirit, as Ryan explains he needs to learn stronger magic to protect his family back home, playfully calling out his masked mentor for testing his resolve with that cheap escape offer, demanding Keval put him down so he can personally handle the giant beast waiting ahead. Determined to prove once and for all that he is definitely not just all talk, but their highly dramatic moment is suddenly interrupted by their pursuer listening to their speech, who casually roast their grand plans as nothing more than a bunch of impossible pipe dreams. This little black cat nervously chimes in, reminding them that they barely survived their last fight, insisting that defeating a fully recovered Rajua is nothing short of a suicide mission. Their scaly pursuer cackles loudly, mocking Ryan's grand ambitions while praising the cat's common sense, roaring that taking down their legendary leader is a completely impossible fantasy. But our boy simply closes his eyes, recalling his master's ultimate secret of visualization, reaching down to grab a simple stone from the dusty ground beneath him, winding up his throwing arm with a fierce look of absolute, unwavering concentration, before hurling the pebble directly at the startled beast to trigger his spell, which the arrogant monster instantly brushes off as a pathetic, completely useless distraction, leaving their feline companion, Eve, to watch the unfolding chaos with wide, anxious eyes. Keval casually holds the anxious cat, telling her there is no point in stopping the kid, admitting that this stubborn human is actually far more hard-headed than he ever was. while Ryan holds onto his master's promise that he can achieve absolutely anything he visualizes, recalling the exact moment he finally chose to believe in his own hidden potential, prompting our young hero to take a deep breath and fully commit to the fight. He locks his target and activates spell Formula 17, focusing entirely on substance expansion, aiming his thumb directly at the tiny pebble flying through the air toward the beast, which suddenly swells into a colossal boulder that leaves the arrogant pursuer completely wide-eyed, crushing the terrified monster under a massive mountain of rock before he can even scream. Even Kevel is left thoroughly impressed by how quickly the kid turned a pebble into a weapon. Ryan looks up at Kevel, mentioning that he just had a highly nostalgic dream, promising to defeat Rajua and recover his mentor's lost arm through sheer belief, since his master would absolutely roast him for ever doubting his own potential. Kevel chuckles softly, realizing the kid has a pretty reliable teacher of his own. But before Ryan can ask if his mentor has ever met other mages, a sudden violent jolt cuts him off as they are spotted again, revealing a fresh wave of persistent monster guards closing in on their position. Realizing they need to go deeper to find Rajua, Kevel eyes the massive crater, telling the group to hold on tight as he prepares to dive. And with a sudden leap, they plunge directly into the dark abyss below. Kevel plunges down the deep abyss, tightly clutching both our boy and their terrified cat companion. But even mid-freefall, the masked warrior casually asks Ryan to teach him that cool expansion trick later, leaving the kid to nervously yell that discussing magic lessons during a literal death drop is completely insane. While back in the peaceful past, young Ryan is fast asleep in his cozy bed, holding onto his master's notebook like a precious treasure even while drifting off to dreamland, clutching the worn-out book tightly as if his entire future depends on the secrets written inside. Meanwhile, at a quiet local hotel, a loud voice echoes through the night, accusing someone of being late, revealing Jean stepping inside with a cheerful grin while her annoyed companion accuses her of drinking all night, prompting the legendary mage to smugly clarify that she was actually out scouting for some incredible new talent, boasting that even Chris would be completely blown away if he saw the kid's raw potential. Jean settles down at the meeting table, ready to get some actual work done. She smirks and calls the meeting to order, demanding reports from the compass directions. This Eastern District scout quickly chimes in, reporting absolutely zero unusual activity on his watch, while the Western Scout calmly echoes the sentiment, confirming his sector is completely quiet too, and the Southern District representative adds his own disappointing lack of results to the pile. Jean realizes a whole week of intense scouting has yielded absolutely nothing in the north, leaving them to conclude that the elusive beast simply has not made its way to the surface yet, prompting the younger scouts to nervously wonder if this hidden monster is actually that dangerous, only for the veteran to warn that their current forces are completely powerless against its raw strength. But Jean points to her head, reminding them that its terrifying intelligence is the real threat. Jean explains that the beast was not some mindless, bloodthirsty monster, but calm and collected, and worst of all, it seemed deeply fascinated by her high-level magic. This bizarre, bandage-wrapped mummy monster is simply too dangerous to be left roaming free, because if a creature like that actually learns to wield magic, humanity is doomed, which is why she is determined to hunt it down and destroy it completely. Meanwhile, the furious blazing lion Rajua roars in anger, promising to slaughter them all, as Ryan and Kevel plunge deeper into the underground to hunt the beast down, deciding to launch a proactive strike instead of waiting around for an ambush. Looking down at his hand, our boy realizes his current strength is still lacking. Knowing he must push past his limits if he wants to defeat Rajua, Ryan traces simple symbols in the dirt, focusing entirely on his immediate goals. He realizes he must quickly heal his arm and help Kevel, but a sudden shout interrupts him. Turns out, our boy is just lying flat on his back, begging for a few more minutes, prompting the highly annoyed cat to drag him up by his collar in enemy territory, because a magician's arms are literally their life, and Ryan simply refuses to wait. Knowing they stand zero chance against Rajua without stronger magic, he prepares for the next step, which triggers another flashback to the day his master Jean announced her sudden departure, explaining that her original mission in his quiet hometown was just a temporary survey. Her annoyed colleague reveals she actually extended her stay just to train the kid, leaving young Ryan to wonder when exactly they will ever meet again. Jean playfully dangles her necklace, leaving her young student with a vague, teasing promise of a future reunion. She admits she cannot wait to see how far his wild imagination will take his magic, giving the kid one final, firm handshake before officially wrapping up her temporary teaching gig, leaving Ryan clutching the precious token she left behind as her colleagues call her away. But just before she disappears, she calls out his name one last time, flashing a bright, cheerful wave that would remain burned into his memory for years, which is exactly why our boy refuses to return to the surface with a broken arm, feeling like an absolute disappointment compared to the legendary mage who trained him. Since mastering magic is his only path forward, he quietly follows his masked guide deeper, finally slipping into a hidden, quiet corner that Kevel deems safe enough for a temporary breather. As Ryan looks up, his eyes widen in absolute disbelief at what lies ahead, revealing a massive, glowing cavern packed with towering ancient trees and jagged crystals. But the real kicker is a colossal tree growing completely upside down from the ceiling, leaving our boy to stutter in shock at the impossible sight of a subterranean forest, defying all laws of nature as the massive canopy hangs directly over their heads. At that exact moment, their sightseeing is cut short by a sudden, ominous chiming sound, just as a massive, sharp-clawed foot slams heavily onto the dusty cavern floor. A towering, multi-eyed deer beast looms over Ryan, radiating a terrifyingly hostile aura, prompting the kid to scream in absolute panic at his mentor's terrible definition of safety, forcing him to quickly prep his magic as he desperately activates his next spell formula. But before Ryan can launch his spell, Kevil's bandaged hand gently stops him, as the masked warrior casually greets the giant beast like an old neighbor, prompting the multi-eyed deer to narrow its spiral gaze directly at our boy, wondering what kind of crazy scheme the masked warrior is cooking up this time. Surprisingly, the monster just sighs and turns away, telling Kevil to take care, leaving our young hero completely dumbfounded by this incredibly peaceful, anticlimactic resolution. With the danger gone, Kevil plops down on the dirt for a quick breather, which prompts Ryan to ask if his mentor actually knows this bizarre underground forest. So the kid grabs a stick and starts sketching a map in the dirt, realizing that this upside-down tree means they are still far from the deepest level. Kevil raises a finger to add a bit more detail to their current situation, sketching another line in the dirt to show the path leading further down, pointing out that the lower levels are actually the main living area of the monsters, revealing that what Ryan thought was the absolute bottom is just a tiny fraction of their habitat. This shocking revelation leaves our boy completely wide-eyed and sweating in pure disbelief, prompting him to frantically declare they must hurry before they get swarmed by hostile beasts. But Kevil casually shuts him down, calmly stating that fighting will not even be necessary, explaining that the subterranean creatures down here are actually incredibly chill compared to the aggressive surface monsters. Our boy realizes their peaceful encounter earlier was not just a lucky fluke, though he still looks completely baffled as Kevil tells him to keep moving forward. Kevil suddenly calls out Ryan's name, drawing the kid's attention back to their conversation, asking him what he would do if a non-magical way to regenerate flesh actually existed, leaving our boy completely stunned as he eagerly asks if such a miracle is even possible, since finding a physical cure could easily solve his broken arm problem without relying on high-level magic. Meanwhile, their silent cat companion watches them from behind a tree, keeping a close eye on their discussion, as Kevil reveals the name of this mysterious, legendary destination is Convection, describing it as the sacred cradle where subterranean monster lives are both born and brought to an end. He theorizes that a place capable of birthing physical bodies might hold the key to regenerating Ryan's arm, though the masked warrior quickly trails off, realizing he might be oversharing his own wild theories, prompting Ryan to smile warmly, teasing his usually quiet mentor for finally opening up to him. Ryan stares at the dirt sketches, completely captivated by the idea of a non-magical cure, though he quickly wonders if this legendary place is just a fairy tale passed down through generations, laughing off the idea that such a perfectly convenient miracle could actually exist in real life, only to be cut off as a dark, bandaged hand suddenly grabs him by the shoulder, revealing their cat companion glaring down at him for daring to doubt Kevil's ancient wisdom, while thrusting a bunch of wriggling, tentacle-like weeds called pulpo grass right into his face. Our boy panics as the cat insists that using these writhing weeds fresh yields the best results. But before he can run, the strange plant begins wrapping itself tightly around his injured hand, instantly sealing his wounds and proving that this bizarre subterranean vegetation actually possesses incredible healing properties, leaving Kevil to stare in quiet envy at how easily the kid gets his arm fixed. Kevil looks down at Ryan, admitting he is incredibly envious of the kid's fresh perspective, prompting our boy to angrily accuse his mentor of just making fun of his ignorance. But Kevil ignores the outburst, eagerly anticipating the kid's reaction when they finally reach Convection, explaining that since he remembers the path perfectly, nothing in these depths surprises him anymore, leaving Ryan to realize that this legendary cradle of life is actually a real place, as Kevil reveals that both he and Eve were actually born in that sacred sanctuary, promising that with his guidance they will successfully navigate the dangerous path ahead, which should allow Ryan to reach the legendary healing grounds and fix his arm. Although stepping into the absolute unknown naturally brings a massive wave of fear and anxiety, Kevil insists that the joy of discovery makes any lingering terror completely insignificant. Eve crosses her arms and sighs, teasing Kevil for being the only one getting excited about ancient history. Ryan smiles warmly, realizing his eccentric mentor has not changed a single bit since they first met, and he admits he is incredibly curious about the mysterious homeland that shaped such a bizarre teacher. Suddenly, both Kevil and Eve freeze as a strange rustling sound echoes through the quiet cavern, but Ryan remains completely unfazed, determined to find out if his arm can truly be saved, prompting Kevil to look down at his student, realizing the kid's resolve is stronger than ever. At that exact moment, a bunch of tiny winged flower spirits suddenly flutter out of the foliage, leaving Ryan completely startled as Kevil identifies them as dryads waking up from their deep slumber, which instantly raises a massive red flag in our boy's mind as he repeats those words, realizing they just casually set up camp directly inside the sleeping spirit's private bedroom. Kevil reassures him that these tiny forest spirits are actually just incredibly curious and mischievous, prompting the excited little creatures to swarm our boy like he is some rare zoo exhibit, demanding he fly or perform some neat tricks to keep them entertained, which makes Kevel decide they should just play along to avoid any unnecessary trouble. But Ryan simply turns his back on the tiny crowd and starts walking away, flatly apologizing to the spirits because they have absolutely no time to waste on games. Our boy declares his burning desire to keep moving forward instead of idling around, earning him a rare, approving smirk from his masked mentor under that dark headpiece, as the kid confidently confirms he is fully prepared to leave at a moment's notice, only for Kevel to immediately ask what their actual plan is, leaving Ryan completely speechless. This tiny forest spirits do not take Ryan's blunt rejection well at all, instantly switching from cute, playful fairies to a terrifyingly aggressive and hostile mob, leaving our boy to sweat as he notices their friendly vibes completely vanish. He frantically asks Kevel if these creatures are actually as harmless as promised, only for his mentor to admit they get incredibly troublesome when they are offended, which immediately triggers a chaotic, full-speed sprint to escape the furious, buzzing swarm. Our boy desperately brainstorms elemental counters, wondering if a simple fire spell would work. But Eve immediately shuts down that terrible idea with a sharp panic scream. She warns that burning the subterranean forest would destroy the entire local ecosystem, while Kevel insists they must resolve this peacefully since the spirits are just playing. Suddenly, Ryan takes a cautious step backward as he tries to process their terrible situation, realizing that dealing with a swarm of angry forest spirits is going to be incredibly tough, prompting our boy to frantically ask if their only option is to obey every single demand. But Kevel casually explains that they just need to play along until the spirits get tired, which gives Ryan a brilliant idea to use a sleeping spell to knock them all out, so his eager mentor immediately offers to cast his own version of the spell. Unfortunately, our young hero instantly realizes that Kevel's definition of a lullaby is wildly different, as a massive, violent gale suddenly erupts and blasts the tiny spirits right into the air, though surprisingly the chaotic little creatures actually find the dizzying wind storm incredibly fun, leaving Ryan to scream in frustration because his mentor just used a deadly wind scythe spell instead. Kevel tilts his head, realizing that Ryan's wind spell actually has a proper name too. Ryan quickly explains that light targets just float away harmlessly instead of getting sliced to pieces. But his mentor is way more interested in learning how to cast a proper sleeping spell, suddenly pressuring our boy to teach him the formula for that cool wind scythe magic, prompting the kid to snap that they definitely do not have time for tutoring right now, only for Kevel to suggest that reversing the formula might turn his deadly wind back into a gentle lullaby. Our boy immediately tries to shut down the idea, warning that magic formulas are never that simple. But then he pauses, his eyes widening as a sudden realization hits him right in the middle of his panic, realizing that reversing the flow of the spell might actually be the perfect solution to their problem, which prompts Kevel to smirk, knowing his student has just cooked up a brilliant plan. Ryan confidently thrusts his hand forward, proposing they cast both spells back-to-back as a team. Kevel studies the mirrored hand signs, wondering if he could actually pull off this trick completely solo, while the tiny flower spirits continue to buzz around them, completely unaware of the magical trap being set. But our boy just grins, pointing out that they will never know unless they actually try it. Convinced by the kid's logic, the masked mentor lets out a rare, amused chuckle under his bandages, and together they initiate the sequence, with Kevel unleashing the first phase of the sleeping spell, sending a soft wave of magic directly toward the swarm, catching the mischievous fairies completely off guard, before Ryan immediately takes the reins, shouting for them to reverse the flow of the spell, which instantly triggers the wind scythe magic to perfectly balance out the chaotic energy of the first cast. Even their silent cat companion cannot help but look on in absolute awe at this ridiculous teamwork. Kevel watches the magical reaction unfold, nodding in quiet understanding as he realizes the plan actually worked. This swirling wind from their combined spell continues to trap the dryads in a localized vortex, keeping the tiny creatures suspended in midair while the sleeping magic slowly takes full effect, prompting the masked mentor to quietly agree as he observes the brilliant tactical move, realizing the sleeping magic was actually distributed as a fine powder carried by the wind, which successfully knocks out every single mischievous spirit, leaving them peacefully napping on the cavern floor. Eve quickly rushes over to check on them, letting out a massive sigh of relief, while our boy nervously asks if their chaotic plan actually worked as intended. But Kevel immediately gives Ryan all the credit, admitting he could not have pulled it off alone. Ryan flashes a confident peace sign, proudly declaring that teamwork is their ultimate secret weapon. Ryan enthusiastically pumps himself up, shouting that it is finally time to head to convection, though Kevel quickly checks in, wondering if the kid is actually fine after burning so much energy. But our boy takes a firm step forward, determined to keep pushing through the exhaustion, playfully asking his mentor to carry him if his legs eventually decide to give out. Kevel casually agrees to the request, completely unaware of a sneaky shadow creeping up behind them, causing Ryan's eyes to widen in sheer terror as he senses a sudden hostile presence, and even his masked mentor freezes in shock as the temperature in the cavern suddenly plummets, before our boy is violently yanked backward, flying through the air away from his companions, prompting Kevel to desperately reach out, screaming the kid's name as he tries to grab him. But Ryan can only stretch his hand out in pure panic as he is dragged into the dark. A dark, clawed limb gets tightly bound by writhing subterranean roots, halting its sudden retreat, as Ryan is dragged away by a massive, thorny vine with a creepy eye-like knot, leaving Kevel desperately reaching out as his student is pulled further into the cavern's depths, until his companions completely vanish into a tiny speck of light in the distance. Our boy faceplints hard onto the dirt, groaning in pain as he slowly recovers his senses, only to look up and realize he is standing in a massive, root-filled chamber, wondering if he somehow ended up trapped inside the hollow core of a giant tree. Suddenly, a strange sound echoes nearby, causing the kid to gasp in sudden alarm. As he turns his head and freezes, his eyes widening in absolute disbelief, spotting something completely unexpected hiding right there in the shadows of this ancient sanctuary. A familiar woman in a kimono casually strolls out from the roots, letting out a relieved sigh. She flashes a warm, knowing smile, greeting our boy like they're just old friends catching up. Ryan stands completely frozen, nervously swallowing hard as his brain struggles to process her sudden appearance. Looking back at her with absolute bewilderment, the kid demands to know why she is even here. But the mysterious woman just chuckles, completely brushing off his intense panic with another lighthearted sigh. Waving her hand, she steps closer, cheerfully repeating her casual greeting to the stunned young hero. Instantly, our boy instinctively clutches his injured arm, his heart hammering against his ribs in pure dread, terrified that this unexpected visitor might have already noticed the dark curse hiding beneath his bandages. At that exact moment, her playful expression suddenly shifts as her eyes narrow with intense curiosity, and she quietly whispers his name, sensing that something is deeply wrong with her former student. She immediately points a finger at him, teasingly shouting that he has not grown a single inch, prompting Ryan to defensively claim he grew a centimeter, which she instantly dismisses as a margin of error. Our boy quickly snaps out of the silly banter, shouting that his height is completely irrelevant right now, as he demands to know why his former master has suddenly appeared in this subterranean cavern, only for her to smile back, casually explaining that she came all this way specifically to save him, before turning around and telling the kid it is time to pack up and head home, leaving Ryan standing in absolute silence as he stares at her back, his expression turning incredibly serious. Suddenly, she glances over her shoulder in surprise as she hears him taking a step backward, asking what is wrong, only for our boy to quietly mutter that he cannot leave just yet. He looks her dead in the eye, firmly declaring that he simply cannot go back home yet. This master stares in utter confusion, demanding to know what he means by refusing to return, especially when Ryan confidently claims he is incredibly close to fully restoring his cursed arm, reminding her that her own research notes never mentioned any magic capable of regenerating lost flesh. But the stubborn kid is absolutely convinced the secret is just waiting to be discovered, firmly declaring that a cure definitely exists somewhere out there in this dangerous world, admitting that while his own reckless behavior caused this mess in the first place, he absolutely refuses to set foot on the surface again until his limb is completely healed, asking his master to patiently wait on the surface while he handles the rest of this journey, flashing a reassuring grin while bragging about how much his magical skills have improved lately, leaving his master completely speechless as he casually mentions that local monsters are actually helping him. Ryan continues explaining how these subterranean creatures have actually been incredibly helpful during his journey, taking a deep breath as he prepares to make a very honest confession, admitting that while he never cared about the endless war between humans and beasts, his perspective has completely shifted after everything he has experienced down here, realizing that many of these supposedly terrifying creatures are actually kind-hearted and misunderstood. He even chuckles, telling his master she would probably get along great with his weird mentor, only to trail off as he notices her standing completely still in tense silence. Holding his breath as a quiet, mocking snicker suddenly escapes her lips, before she completely loses it, bursting into a fit of loud, hysterical laughter, leaving our young hero staring in absolute disbelief at her bizarre, unhinged reaction. Her loud, mocking laughter echoes through the chamber, completely shattering Ryan's serious mood, leaving our boy to blink in utter confusion as he quietly calls out to her, while she finally catches her breath, letting out a heavy, dramatic sigh. She repeats his ridiculous plan back to him, mocking his idea of partnering with beasts, her lips curling into a sharp, condescending smirk that spells absolute trouble, before she looks him dead in the eye and asks if he is actually stupid. This cruel master bluntly declares his goal completely impossible, admitting she was barely holding back her laughter, which hits the kid like a physical blow, leaving him completely frozen in shock. Suddenly, her voice begins to warp as a strange, dizzying sensation washes over him, making his vision spin wildly while she laments how far he fell just to fail. Her playful facade completely vanishes, replaced by a cold, piercing gaze that cuts right through him. She admits she actually expected some real growth from her former student after all this time, but instead she is just deeply disappointed by how pathetic he still looks. These harsh words hit Ryan like a physical blow, instantly triggering a flood of painful memories, reminding him of the cruel kids who always blamed him whenever their team lost, constantly mocking his clumsy nature and calling him too much of a coward to act. And even back then, everyone just wanted him to stay out of their way. This brutal montage of childhood rejection echoes in his mind, reminding him of his supposed worthlessness. dragging him right back down to reality as his trembling legs finally give out, leaving our exhausted hero slumped on the cold ground, completely unable to even stand up. She looks down at him with pure disappointment, noting that he still does not know his own limits, urging the trembling kid to finally give up and accept his pathetic reality, flashing a cheerful but completely hollow smile while telling him to stop being so incredibly selfish. But just as she demands they return to the surface, a sudden cracking sound echoes nearby, causing her eyes to widen in sudden surprise as the massive roots above them begin to splinter, and Keval suddenly crashes through the ceiling, landing right between them with his weapons drawn, forcing the master to quickly step back, her playful attitude instantly replaced by a cold glare, while the masked mentor growls in pure anger, recognizing the threat standing before his student. This woman looks at the masked warrior, demanding to know why a mere monster is getting between them. But Keval remains completely silent, his cold gaze locked onto her as the tension reaches its peak. This former master casually shrugs off the interruption, muttering that Keval's sudden arrival changes absolutely nothing, before instantly unleashing a massive blast of wind to blow the masked warrior away, forcing Keval to cross his blades and brace himself against the sudden, violent shockwave. But instead of fighting back, the mentor quickly calls out to their cat-eared companion, ordering Eve to grab Ryan and get as far away from the battle as possible, while he prepares to face the terrifyingly powerful mage completely on his own. Our boy can only watch in helpless silence, quietly whispering his master's name in despair, wondering what kind of history these two powerful fighters actually share with each other. But his vision begins to fade as exhaustion finally takes its toll on his body, leaving him to slip into unconsciousness, completely powerless to stop the impending clash. Keval stares back in absolute shock, instantly recognizing the dangerous presence standing before him. She accuses the masked warrior of using Ryan to destroy the human world, promising to stop him. But Keval just scoffs behind his mask, realizing how incredibly transparent her own assumptions are, prompting her to narrow her eyes, demanding to know what kind of scheme he is running. This masked mentor calmly points out that while her disguise is decent, her plan is deeply flawed, causing her to lash out with a sudden aggressive swipe of her long kimono sleeve. But Keval easily slides back, starting to dissect her sloppy technique with brutal honesty, explaining that actual humans would never refer to subterranean monsters as magical beasts, which makes her flinch in surprise as he prepares to drop another truth bomb, pointing out that her specific spell formula is completely incapable of manipulating subterranean plants. This fake master freezes, her eyes narrowing as she realizes her perfect cover is rapidly falling apart. Keval steps forward to deliver his final devastating observation with absolute, unwavering confidence, pointing out that her lack of a human scent has nothing to do with his own senses, which instantly causes her eye to widen in pure shock as her entire facade crumbles. Realizing the game is finally up, she lets out a heavy, disappointed sigh, complaining that the masked warrior is far too noisy with his endless chatter, before her face literally cracks open to reveal a sinister, grinning monster hiding underneath, completely shattering her human disguise in a sudden, violent explosion of dark energy, leaving Keval to calmly face the massive, thorny beast that has finally revealed its true form. As a single, glowing eye stares back from the pitch-black void of its terrifying face, two hungry little plant minions pop up beside the rose monster, begging to eat Keval next, but she immediately snaps at them, furiously demanding they address her as princess instead, before her single eye narrows with a chilling promise to strangle everyone and enjoy their feast, complaining that these constant interruptions are wasting her precious time down here. Meanwhile, Keval glances back to check on Ryan's condition after that brutal mental attack, and Eve confirms she finished treating him, though his senses will remain completely blocked for now, leaving the masked mentor to quietly process the news as he faces the enemy once more. This rose monster sneers at their little huddle, mockingly praising their absolutely perfect timing, only for Keval to sprout four massive arms, casually offering to use them as target practice, instantly sending the arrogant plant princess into a state of sheer panic as the tables turn. Keval remembers Ryan warning him against using this magic, but the kid is too unconscious to notice, prompting the panicked plant princess to desperately order her minions to finish him off immediately. And the obedient little weeds charge forward with absolute confidence, completely unaware of what is coming. Meanwhile, the masked mentor calmly recalls Ryan's lessons about how human magic actually functions, explaining that humans must channel nature's energy through their fingers to cast any spells, meaning their overall output is strictly limited by their physical limbs and fingers, allowing them to only alter existing elements like wind or size within very strict boundaries. But those pathetic mortal limitations simply do not apply to a beast of his caliber, because his forbidden forearm technique can literally manifest devastating physical matter out of thin air, telling his enemies to watch closely as he prepares to show them true, absolute power. He reveals that his ultimate technique is nothing short of magic that literally creates brand new souls, leaving the plant princess and her minions to watch in stunned silence as the spell activates. And with a sudden flash, Keval conjures three incredibly chubby, round cat-like creatures out of nowhere, leaving the terrifying plant monsters completely dumbfounded by the sheer absurdity of his grand summon, while the adorable little cat blobs just float there, sparkling with pure innocent energy. This masked mentor proudly gestures to his creations, smugly asking the enemy if they are thoroughly impressed. bragging that while it was his first time summoning multiple blobs at once, it went perfectly. This plant princess instantly loses her temper, screaming at him to stop messing around with stupid mascots, before her thorny vines whip forward, instantly slicing the helpless cat blobs into sad little pieces, leaving the angry princess to mockingly ask if he actually expected those weaklings to save him. Keval raises his clawed hands with absolute confidence, preparing to unleash another devastating spell. He spreads his forearms wide, instantly conjuring massive shards of ice all around them. This plant princess blinks in confusion, wondering if he actually thinks a simple freeze will work. But the masked mentor quickly corrects her, explaining that his magic is far more sinister than that, because her little minions did not just get frozen, they literally became the ice itself, meaning their very physical matter was completely replaced, leaving nothing but melting water behind. This masked mentor smugly asks if she appreciates the beauty of his magic, completely mocking her power, causing her single eye to widen in sudden sheer terror as she realizes the danger, and she looks down in horror, realizing her own roots are already frozen solid. Our masked mentor casually apologizes for his poor control, admitting he actually wanted to freeze her whole body. This plant princess glares at him in sheer disbelief, sweating as her perfect plan completely falls apart. She demands to know why he is protecting a human, completely baffled by his bizarre actions. But Keval calmly shifts his stance, refusing to give her a straight answer just yet. Instead, he addresses her by her formal title, calling her the Thorn Princess, before asking her when she honestly believes this endless war between humans and monsters will finally end, prompting her to bluntly state that peace only comes once every single human is dead. She explains that this absolute eradication is the ultimate shared desire of all monsters, revealing that this genocidal dream is driven by the will of their mysterious leader, Lord Rajua. Our masked mentor merely nods in quiet understanding, his lack of surprise instantly throwing her off, leaving the plant princess to sweat in confusion, suddenly realizing his calm reaction makes absolutely no sense. This thorn princess scoffs, asking if he actually believes humans and monsters can ever reconcile, before screaming at him to stop messing around with such completely delusional ideas, insisting that their supreme leader would never approve of anything short of total human extinction. But Keval calmly cuts her off, dryly noting that her fanatical devotion to Rajua is incredibly obvious. Meanwhile, Eve watches over the unconscious Ryan, hoping their mentor has a real plan. As the masked warrior raises his dark hand, admitting she would probably just laugh at his goal, yet he still decides to make one thing absolutely clear to the frozen plant princess, suddenly grabbing her by the throat to declare that he will protect Ryan from every single threat, leaving Eve and the barely conscious kid to watch the intense standoff from a safe distance, because Keval coldly reveals that he absolutely needs the boy's unique power for his own ultimate plan. This thorn princess stares back in absolute terror, her single eye widening as she realizes she is completely trapped. She desperately gasps for answers, but Keval merely tightens his grip to silence her once and for all, coldly declaring that he has absolutely nothing left to say to a monster of her caliber. With a sudden, violent shatter, the frozen plant princess crumbles into harmless piles of melting ice. As the dust settles, Eve quietly steps forward and addresses the masked mentor as her brother, asking him if he still intends to keep Ryan completely in the dark about their ultimate plan. But Keval takes a slow step forward, delivering a flat and immediate refusal without any hesitation, explaining that the future remains far too uncertain to burden the kid with such heavy secrets just yet, though he is confident the perfect moment to reveal the truth will eventually present itself. Until that day arrives, he quietly asks his companions to bear with the hardship and keep cooperating. Eve pledges her absolute loyalty, promising to do whatever it takes to stay by her brother's side, and Keval quietly accepts her devotion, offering a rare moment of genuine gratitude behind his mask. But their emotional sibling bonding is cut short when Ryan suddenly groans and begins to stir. Our boy slowly blinks his eyes open, instantly recognizing his mentor's familiar voice through the haze, though Keval immediately tells him to stay put before he accidentally hurts himself trying to stand, leaving Ryan to quietly focus his blurry vision as the lingering mental fog finally clears, only to find nothing but a puddle of melted ice where the terrifying princess once stood. He lets out a soft sigh of relief, quietly thanking his master for saving his life. But Keval immediately ruins the moment by launching into a completely unprompted lecture about monster biology, leaving a deeply confused Ryan to wonder why his savior is suddenly rambling about dryad habitats. Keval continues his highly detailed lecture on thorn people, leaving Ryan to question his life choices, explaining that since their poison acts slowly, these monsters rely on a secondary trick, which is a specialized biological mechanism designed to keep their victims completely immobilized by extracting memories from physical wounds to mimic someone close to the target, keeping the victim utterly disoriented while the trap slowly but surely closes in, until the spreading toxin finally paralyses their body, completing the perfect hunt. This masked mentor sighs at the timing, noting they ran into this exact species, before looking directly at his student to deliver the ultimate reassuring punchline, revealing that the terrifying monster Ryan just fought was actually nothing but a fake, meaning the kid can finally stop stressing over a threat that already melted away. Ryan blinks in utter confusion, wondering what exactly he was supposed to be worrying about, because he actually figured out the monster was a total fake without any fancy explanation. prompting Keval to quietly nod in approval, glad his student's instincts are still sharp. Though the emotional toll of the illusion still leaves the poor kid holding back tears, he wipes his eyes while walking away, knowing his real master would never visit this dump, which makes Keval pause, silently processing the kid's deep attachment to his true teacher. But Ryan quickly flashes a bright smile, declaring that everything is finally going to be okay, leaving the frozen remains of the plant princess behind as the group prepares to move on. Still, our boy cannot help but think back to the real mentor he left behind, remembering that smiling face and knowing they would never end up in a place like this. Ryan closes his eyes, silently reminding himself that he is no longer the weak kid from before, because once he reclaims his lost arm and defeats Rajua, everyone will finally respect his magic. Though his dramatic internal monologue is suddenly cut short by a weirdly quiet moment, still, our boy smiles knowing he does not have to face these terrifying trials completely alone anymore, especially since Keval is actively guiding him and showing him all the best magical shortcuts, telling himself to stop dwelling on past failures and focus entirely on the dark cave ahead, taking a confident step forward into the unknown with his head held incredibly high. Convinced that as long as he and his mentor stick together, nothing can stop them. But his grand daydream instantly shatters when a sudden realization hits him like a truck, leaving Ryan to spin around in absolute shock, realizing his companions actually know his master. Keval explains that the red-haired magician the Thorn Princess was disguised as was actually one of the humans who invaded his territory just like Ryan did, leading to a massive battle between them, which Ryan finds to be a wild coincidence, prompting our boy to wonder if his legendary master was actually as strong as rumored, since he spent 2 whole weeks with her but only ever noticed her stunning beauty, leaving the kid to realize he has absolutely no idea if she can actually fight. But the masked mentor is still in complete awe every single time he remembers her, recalling how her fingers moved like flowing water to unleash magnificent, endless magical techniques, making Ryan realize his mentor only became obsessed with magic because of her incredible influence. Even though Keval never got to speak with her, meeting Ryan finally fulfilled his ultimate wish. Keval admits he is genuinely surprised to learn Ryan was actually her disciple, but our boy can only offer a nervous sweat and a highly doubtful response, remembering how his terrifying master used to constantly call him an absolute idiot, before flatly telling him how incredibly disappointing his magical progress actually was, while Keval completely misses the trauma, casually wishing he could learn from her too. Meanwhile, the tiny leftover bud of the plant princess curses her own foolishness, as Eve warns the group about the dangers of getting separated in this cave, only for a sudden, violent tremor to instantly knock Ryan flat on his face, leaving the kid to panic about a sudden earthquake while his mentor looks around. But a strange, echoing sound nearby tells them this is no natural disaster. Keval's eyes widen behind his mask as he senses the ceiling starting to give way, and a massive boulder crashes down with a deafening roar, completely blocking their path, leaving Ryan coughing in a thick cloud of dust as he desperately calls out, only to hear a muffled voice from the other side asking if he is okay. Our boy frantically looks around the dark cavern, shouting his mentor's name into the gloom, while Keval and Eve confirm they are perfectly fine but completely cut off from him. This massive rock barrier looks completely solid, leaving the separated group wondering how to reunite, prompting Ryan to admit his current magical output is not nearly enough to shatter it. But a sudden spark of inspiration flares up in his mind as he raises his hand, realizing he can easily mimic Keval's four-armed magic to blast this obstacle into tiny pieces. Keval cheerfully decides to test out some highly experimental, untested spells on the massive rock barrier, leaving Ryan sweating in sheer terror as he envisions multiple futures where he gets vaporized. But before the kid can protest, his mentor calmly tells him to just go on ahead, explaining that they will take an alternate route and meet up with him very soon. This detour apparently has far fewer monsters and leads straight to a wide-open area, which happens to be located right next to their ultimate destination, the convection zone, prompting Ryan's face to instantly light up with pure, unadulterated excitement at the great news, and he immediately bolts down the dark tunnel, completely ignoring Eve's frantic warnings to wait. She angrily demands he listen to the full explanation, but Keval casually waves her off, unaware that running ahead blindly in a monster-infested cave is usually a terrible idea. Ryan's head peeks over a rocky ledge as he pants heavily from the sudden exertion, looking around the dark, crystalline cavern and wondering if he really has to go alone. But he quickly convinces himself that his mentor simply has absolute faith in his abilities, though his body suddenly feels incredibly heavy, making him realize something is seriously wrong, prompting the kid to wonder if that plant princess's lingering poison is still active. Yet he forces himself to keep moving forward because Keval is waiting for him, until a chillingly familiar voice suddenly echoes through the dark, freezing him in place, as his red-haired master appears, mockingly reminding him that nobody ever expected anything from him, leaving the poor kid completely paralyzed with fear as the cruel illusion continues to taunt him, casually asking what he really thinks about his new mentor's suspicious behavior. This illusion continues to mock Keval's obsession, pointing out how weird it is that he gave up his magic. She steps closer to deliver the harsh truth, claiming our boy has been completely brainwashed from the start. A giant, creepy grin looms over Ryan as the voice laughs at the sheer absurdity of human-monster cooperation. Sweating profusely under the intense mental pressure, the kid desperately tries to shut out the mocking voice. But a massive, shadowy monster suddenly materializes right behind him, reaching out with sharp, terrifying claws, leaving Ryan to freeze in absolute terror as he realizes he might actually be completely doomed, only for the terrifying beast to reveal itself as a hilariously shocked, sweat-dropping bird monster instead. Before our boy can even react, a chaotic scuffle erupts with feathers flying absolutely everywhere. This clumsy creature lets out a pathetic shriek of pain, completely ruining the dark, suspenseful atmosphere, prompting a deeply confused Ryan to squint through the dust and realize what is actually happening. Turns out this terrifying beast is actually a harpy with a surprisingly expressive human face, though it looks absolutely nothing like the sleek, ferocious predators Ryan read about in books, prompting our boy to quietly sneak past while the chubby creature is busy groaning. But the poor bird is actually having a massive panic attack about facing a human, silently lamenting how incredibly clumsy, slow, and utterly useless it is compared to its peers, slumping down in a heap of pure self-pity right in front of the traveling kid. This pathetic display triggers Ryan, who points an angry finger and demands it pull itself together, telling the shocked monster to completely ignore anyone who ever dared to look down on it, leaving the emotional creature staring back at him with wide, tear-filled eyes as his words hit home. Because putting yourself down only reinforces the toxic belief that you are destined to fail. Ryan continues his passionate speech, telling the bird monster to choose positive beliefs instead, loudly declaring that it can achieve absolutely anything if it just starts believing in itself, only for a long, incredibly awkward silence to stretch out between them in the dark cave, leaving our boy to instantly regret his overly dramatic, unprompted motivational speech, as he frantically waves his hands around to laugh off his own embarrassing outburst. But the clumsy harpy cannot help but let out a sudden, muffled snort of amusement, before breaking into a soft, tearful smile and thanking the heavens for this bizarre encounter, quickly waving its feathered hands to promise it is not actually mocking Ryan's intense speech, which leaves the kid blinking in confusion, wondering why a monster would feel relieved around him, until the creature explains it has never seen a human before and expected a terrifying predator, completely contradicting Rajua's lies. This chubby harpy smiles warmly, realizing that maybe humans are not the heartless monsters she was taught to fear. And this sudden revelation strikes a deep chord within our boy's empathetic heart, as the bird creature happily nods, finally feeling a sense of genuine relief, prompting Ryan to offer a warm, reassuring smile of his own in agreement. But the cozy atmosphere instantly evaporates when she asks what he is doing in this dangerous cave, leaving the kid completely stumped as a sudden noise from down the tunnel startles them, forcing Ryan to quickly duck behind her massive feathers to avoid being spotted by passing guards, while the nervous bird monster tries her absolute best to act completely natural. Our boy realizes he needs to reach the end of this heavily guarded path, but convincing a bunch of hostile cave dwellers to let a human pass seems completely impossible. Ryan panics and prepares to use magic to escape, but the harpy suddenly grabs him, stuffing him headfirst into a giant woven basket with a cheerful offer to guide him, leaving our boy completely dumbfounded as she happily carries him along like a prized grocery item, though she secretly wonders if this fragile human kid can actually survive down here. Suddenly, they hit a dead end because the cave's natural light stones were shattered, trapping them in total darkness until our boy casually offers to help, quietly prepping a basic light spell formula right in the palm of his hand, and instantly conjuring bright floating orbs that illuminate the entire cavern with ease. This harpy lets out a loud shriek of pure amazement, forcing Ryan to quickly shush her, as she wonders if all humans possess such incredible, effortless magical talent. This chubby harpy stares in absolute awe at the bright, floating magical lights, looking at a nearby berry branch and realizing how different she is from this talented human. She sighs deeply, admitting she is a total coward who cannot even fly to pick berries, explaining how she gets constantly teased and scolded back home for returning with an empty basket, before looking down at Ryan with pure admiration, wishing she could be cool like him. Hearing this, our boy immediately stops her with a serious, slightly deadpan expression, pointing out that he could not always use magic and still has plenty of weaknesses, leaving the bird monster blinking in confusion as she wonders what he does in those moments, until Ryan suddenly flashes a cheerful peace sign right in front of her face, happily declaring that whenever things get tough, they can just figure it out together. Ryan offers to help her harvest those high-hanging berries as a thank you for the guidance, which instantly sends the emotional bird monster into absolute hysterics of pure, tearful gratitude. But when he suggests she simply fly up to grab them, she frantically declines, leaving our boy to brainstorm alternative harvesting methods that will not completely pulverize the delicate fruit, suddenly remembering that harpies are supposed to be able to shoot razor-sharp feathers like projectiles. A suggestion that immediately triggers another massive wave of performance anxiety for the poor creature, as she frantically shakes her wings in a desperate, clumsy attempt to summon some ammunition, only to instantly exhaust herself and slump over in yet another pathetic display of failure. Picking up a fallen feather, Ryan marvels at how incredibly sharp and sturdy it actually is, sparking a brilliant new idea in his mind on how to weaponize her natural gifts. This chubby harpy slumps on the ground, completely convinced she will never pull off such a cool trick. Ignoring her self-pity, Ryan silently starts scribbling a brand new spell formula on a piece of paper. He admits he has never tried cutting wood with a feather, but its lightweight design might actually work. Ryan suddenly asks what exactly was running through her head during her earlier failed attempt, instructing her to strongly visualize the exact outcome she wants instead of focusing on her doubts, recalling his former master's lesson that simple wishing is never enough to trigger real magical power. Our boy explains that within her own mind, she has the power to fly whenever she wants, leaving the emotional harpy to repeat his inspiring words like a sacred, life-changing mantra. And with a sharp flick of his wrist, Ryan unleashes his sixth spell formula, levitation, sending him blasting forward through the air at a speed that defies all laws of gravity. This magically enhanced feather slices clean through the thick wooden branch in a single, effortless stroke, leaving the chubby harpy to gasp in absolute disbelief as the heavy branch begins to fall. But she quickly reacts, catching the falling wood with her sharp claws before it hits the ground, holding her prize high in the air while cheering about their incredibly successful berry harvest. She happily sings his praises, calling our boy a literal genius for pulling off such a miracle, only for Ryan to look back with a humble smile, quietly insisting that he is no genius, explaining that teamwork and clever tactics are just valuable lessons he learned from his former master, and the trick only worked because of her own uniquely lightweight, incredibly powerful feathers, which means this impressive harvest is actually a victory she earned through her own natural traits, sending a warm wave of pride through the emotional bird monster as she celebrates their joint achievement. Ryan holds the freshly harvested berries while the harpy suggests splitting the loot on her feathers, but our boy suddenly freezes as something unexpected catches his eye in the dark, revealing two tiny, shadowy cave dwellers peeking out from behind a nearby boulder, and Ryan instantly recognizes the little creatures as Kevil's loyal companions, prompting him to gently cut off the harpy's endless stream of tearful gratitude, leaving the chubby bird monster blinking in utter confusion at his sudden change of tone. He smiles warmly, pointing out that hanging around a human will only get her in trouble, which is a harsh reality that instantly hits home for the gentle creature. So he leaves his floating light spell behind and asks her to keep their meeting a secret, before quietly slipping away into the shadows while she watches him go with a heavy heart. Suddenly, a soft voice calls out from the darkness behind him, chirping a single word, which stops our boy dead in his tracks as he turns around in utter confusion, because the chubby bird monster is actually trying to tell him her name, before looking up at him with wide, hopeful eyes to ask for his name too. Ryan pauses for a moment, realizing how strange it is to make a friend here, while the nervous harpy fidgets, wondering if she crossed some sort of line, but he just chuckles at how weird it is to ask right as they part, cheerfully promising Cuckoo that this is definitely not the end of their story. This simple promise sends a massive wave of joy straight through her heart, leaving her to wave her wings wildly as she happily bids her new friend farewell. Ryan walks down the dark cave path, feeling surprisingly energized after his wholesome encounter with Cuckoo. But his peaceful moment is cut short as he senses a familiar presence waiting ahead, revealing Kevil standing tall in the shadows alongside the cat-like warrior and their tiny companions, prompting our boy to offer a casual, slightly smug greeting to ease the tension, while Kevil stares back with a deadpan expression, clearly unimpressed by the kid's dramatic entrance. This cat-like warrior immediately points at the feathers in Ryan's hand, recognizing them instantly. But Ryan just smiles warmly and explains he managed to get through without any fighting, only to notice a sudden, incredibly tense silence settling over the group, as Kevil slowly turns away with a cold, highly suspicious response that speaks volumes, leaving our boy to sweat nervously, wondering if he just accidentally walked into a trap. Ryan sighs in frustration, realizing his attempt to play it cool has completely backfired. Kevil points out that monsters and humans usually have plenty of reasons to fight each other, but the cat-like warrior quietly admits he wishes they could have met without any violence, wondering if a peaceful world exists where they could have simply discussed magic together, before quickly brushing it off as nothing more than a silly, unrealistic daydream. Suddenly, a bunch of freshly harvested berries are dumped onto the ground right before them, as Kevil bluntly tells his companion that he is overthinking the whole situation, while their tiny companions happily play with the fruit, completely ignoring the heavy philosophical debate, prompting Kevil to ask if this lingering regret is why his friend seems so down. But Ryan steps in, pointing out that their chaotic start does not change how well they get along now. Ryan looks up at the tall jackal warrior, boldly claiming their compatibility is absolutely perfect, flashing a cheeky grin as he asks if he is actually wrong about their bond, prompting a quiet, amused chuckle to echo through the dark, damp cavern, as Kevil stares down at our boy with a surprisingly soft expression, slowly admitting that this weird human kid is genuinely one of a kind, before bluntly calling him a total weirdo, sending Ryan face-planting onto the dirt. This cat-like warrior sighs at his brother's terrible social skills, telling him to just say, "good guy." But she quickly shrugs it off, glad to see everyone is finally getting along, until a sudden, violent tremor violently shakes the entire cave system, catching them off guard, forcing Kevil to warn the group about these highly unusual, dangerous earthquakes. Kevil points out that their destination, the convection zone, is just a short walk ahead, and Ryan eagerly agrees, ready to finally see what kind of secrets this place holds. Meanwhile, in another part of the cavern, the red-haired warrior Jean prepares to move out, asking her scarred companion Chris if he is finally geared up and ready to go. She flashes a confident grin, eager to get some exercise before enjoying a nice evening drink. Nearby, a mysterious glowing triangle symbol is carved deeply into the solid stone wall, serving as a magical teleportation marker right next to a small, unassuming puddle. until the magic suddenly activates, bursting with a violent splash of water and light, sending a startled cry echoing through the cavern as someone gets a very wet welcome, leaving poor Chris slipping on the wet ground while Jean laughs at his terrible luck. Jean cheerfully teases Chris about his clumsy entrance, completely ignoring his grumbles about his terrible luck, as the scarred warrior sighs, admitting he was already dreading this mission from the very start. Especially since they are finally about to reunite with Ryan after 3 long years apart. But Chris remains deeply uneasy about illegally duo-queuing a dungeon that strictly requires a 4-man party, prompting Jean to playfully ask if he simply lacks faith in her top-tier combat skills, though Chris quickly reminds her of her own past warning about their slim chances of survival, wondering how they will possibly survive if the legendary dungeon mummy actually decides to show up. Since the recent monster reports perfectly match the terrifying details of their encounter 3 years ago, back when Ryan fought that horrific beast entirely alone before mysteriously vanishing for a whole week, leaving the scarred warrior staring ahead with a heavy, anxious gaze as they venture deeper. Chris points out that the odds of running into the mummy are way higher than finding Ryan, but Jean confidently replies that she is definitely going to search for her cute apprentice anyway, flashing a massive, carefree grin as she claims she is not worried about a single thing, boasting that with their current strength, even a legendary dungeon mummy would be a total pushover, prompting a flustered Chris to push her along while trying to steer the conversation back to reality, asking her in a serious tone if she honestly believes Ryan is still alive down here, considering a rookie of his age pushing this deep into the dungeon is practically unheard of, especially since he recklessly formed a highly suspicious last-minute party before diving into the abyss, making the odds of finding even a piece of his body feel like an absolute miracle, only for Jean to turn back with a smug, knowing smirk that completely catches him off guard. Chris crosses his arms and sighs, bluntly admitting he actually cannot stand Ryan at all, listing off all the kid's worst traits like a laundry list of pure stubbornness and delusion, which only makes Jean tease him about how much he secretly obsessives over their former ally. But the scarred warrior quickly deflects, begging her to actually focus on the dangerous path ahead, sensing that something is deeply off about the eerie silence echoing through the cavern, pointing out they have wandered far past the safety of their magical teleportation markers, only to realize the entire area is completely devoid of a single monster, prompting the red-haired warrior to suddenly sprint forward into the dark without warning, leaving a panicked Chris to scream in confusion as she recklessly charges ahead. As she confidently smiles, knowing that an empty dungeon means someone else got here first, Jean theorizes that the local monsters were either completely wiped out in an instant, or, meanwhile, a desperate group of beastmen gathers around a campfire to discuss their sudden, forced retreat, with one anxious wolf warrior noting they still have a few scraps of unburned wood left, prompting a clawed hand to reach directly into the embers to retrieve the precious fuel, while their lizard companion begins praying to an ancient deity for a desperate boost of power, instantly triggering a violent eruption of magical energy that bursts straight out of the dirt, channeling a blinding column of light to summon a force that supposedly rules over life itself, revealing a massive, horned dragon warrior standing tall amidst the swirling smoke and crackling flames, though this intimidating beast immediately curses his own weakness for letting his guard down earlier, before bluntly ordering his overjoyed subordinates to prepare for an immediate hunt after Kevel and Ryan. This horned dragon warrior growls in frustration, desperately trying to track down his escaped targets. But his angry search is suddenly interrupted by a cheerful voice asking about a certain human brat. As a gloved hand casually holds up a sketch of Ryan wearing his signature wizard hat, Jean flashes a playful grin, asking the massive beast if this is the kid he is hunting, prompting the furious dragon warrior to roar in anger, threatening to blast her to absolute ashes, which only makes the red-haired warrior celebrate her incredible luck at finding a lead so quickly. Before she raises her hand, fully prepared to beat the answers out of her giant scaly opponent, suddenly Chris steps right in front of her, his hand already resting firmly on his sword hilt, noting that since Ryan is up ahead, he should be the one to handle this fight, bluntly telling Jean that she should not waste her precious time on such a minor obstacle. This scaly giant growls in pure fury, absolutely hating how much Chris's cocky attitude resembles Ryan's, prompting the scarred warrior to freeze in place as the comparison instantly strikes a nerve, while the dragon warrior boasts about turning him into a pile of burnt charcoal, only to gasp in shock as Chris suddenly lunges forward with blinding speed, declaring that he is also incredibly pissed off and ready to unleash some serious pain, proudly introducing himself as a vice captain who refuses to be lumped in with some rookie kid. Meanwhile, the path to the convection zone lies just past a quiet, primitive mountain settlement, leading directly into a pitch-black cavern where their next major challenge awaits them, as the local beastmen worry that things will get incredibly messy if the villagers spot Ryan. But Kevel confidently assures his companions that passing through this area will be absolute child's play. Looking down at our boy, Kevel asks if he is finally ready to execute their foolproof plan, only to reveal Ryan completely covered in a ridiculous assortment of decorative flowers, leaves, and berries, prompting the jackal warrior to nod in approval, declaring that the kid's absurd disguise is absolutely perfect, while Ryan stares back with a deeply unamused expression, demanding to know what exactly is so perfect, arguing that his high-tier invisibility spell should be more than enough to sneak past the local villagers. This jackal warrior patiently explains that while the spell hides his body, it does nothing for his scent. As the cat-like warrior aggressively smacks Ryan with a leafy branch to shut down his constant whining, before the jackal warrior quickly double-checks if their apprentice actually remembers the complex spell pattern, explaining that reversing his finger positions is the key to turning his lightning magic into pure invisibility. Leaving our boy sweating bullets as he suddenly realizes he forgot a crucial step of the process. Kevel casually asks if he is allowed to test his lightning magic on actual living targets, prompting a panicked Ryan to scream that lightning is, by definition, incredibly lethal, lecturing the giant jackal on how his lack of restraint makes the spell a flashy hazard, though Kevel's overly cheerful response immediately convinces his sister that he did not listen to a word. Quickly pivoting back to their main goal of casting the perfect stealth spell, as the jackal warrior confidently weaves the complex hand signs to activate the magic, leaving our boy standing in his ridiculous leafy disguise as the spell begins to take effect, slowly turning his entire body completely transparent, much to the absolute amazement of his companions, who can only stare in awe at the empty space where the kid just stood. Confirming that the spell worked perfectly, even if they can still hear his relieved voice, Kevel instructs the invisible kid to hop right onto his broad shoulder to begin their stealthy trek, while Eve confirms that the stealth magic is working perfectly and Ryan is completely undetectable, though our boy is not exactly thrilled about riding shotgun on a giant jackal warrior's shoulder. He quickly shrugs it off as they prepare to make their move into the settlement. Suddenly, a loud cracking sound echoes nearby, instantly putting the group on high alert, leaving Eve completely frozen in shock as she tries to process the sudden noise. But they push forward anyway, entering a quiet village filled with primitive tents and scattered debris. Walking past the local inhabitants reveals nothing but incredibly tiny, adorable creatures going about their day, prompting Ryan to realize this supposed monster settlement is actually far less intimidating than he expected. Until his eyes suddenly widen as he spots something highly unusual just ahead. Instead of bloodthirsty monsters, the village is filled with tiny, adorable creatures peacefully sharing a harvest, with hardworking little moles pulling carts of fresh pumpkins through the quiet, dirt-paved streets, while others diligently hang up their laundry, looking more like plush toys than dangerous dungeon threats, and a gentle mother rabbit cradles her sleeping newborn in a cozy, plaid-patterned blanket, leaving Ryan completely dumbfounded by how incredibly normal and peaceful their daily lives actually are, until a tiny, trembling voice suddenly calls out from behind, catching him completely off guard, revealing a small, horned rabbit nervously addressing Kevel by his official title as the Gravekeeper, though our boy quickly realizes the locals have not actually noticed his invisible presence at all. As the anxious villager explains that recent earthquakes have been terrifying the local children lately, prompting Ryan to gently reassure them while secretly wondering if his old friend Cuckoo lives nearby. Ryan looks around the peaceful village, realizing he has not spotted a single harpy yet, only for a winged shadow to suddenly swoop down from the cavern ceiling, prompting our boy to yell out in absolute shock as the threat appears. Kevel instantly locks his gaze onto the incoming aerial invaders, his instincts kicking in, while another winged beast circles above with a magical staff ready to strike. As the jackal warrior urgently orders Ryan to fall back and hide immediately, terrified rabbit villagers scramble for safety while the group prepares for an unavoidable clash. But the lead harpy lands with a heavy thud, coldly commanding his minions, declaring they will burn the entire settlement to ensure nobody escapes their grasp. And with a cruel smirk, a winged mage unleashes a torrent of devastating fire. This smug harpy leader commands his forces, confidently declaring that a human must be hiding nearby, before turning his arrogant gaze directly toward Kevel to demand answers about their secret guest, prompting the jackal warrior to growl in disgust, calling out the winged invader named Fruge. But the smirking harpy simply shrugs, accusing Kevel of smuggling a dangerous human into their sanctuary, coldly pointing out that such reckless behavior is actively putting every monster life in danger, as he raises a clawed hand to declare their holy mission to eliminate the human intruder, leaving Kevel to scoff at the sheer hypocrisy of their supposed quest for peace, while a furious Eve steps forward, refusing to listen to another word of his nonsense, pointing at the burning ruins of the village to roast his pathetic hero of justice act, which only elicits a creepy, mocking chuckle from the sadistic harpy leader. Fruge laughs off Eve's accusations, mocking the idea that they are the ones in the wrong, his eyes narrowing with a chilling, self-righteous certainty as he prepares to deliver his final judgment, declaring that their defense is nothing short of being completely and utterly ridiculous. Before spitting out that creatures whose very existence is a mistake have no right to speak, Ryan watches from his invisible vantage point, sweating as the harpy leader continues his unhinged rant. Fruge screams that neither humans nor walking corpses have any place in their master's new world, instantly ordering his winged squad to dive-bomb the group with absolute lethal intent, as a sharp claw scrapes against the rocky ground to build up momentum, unleashing a massive, sweeping wind slash that cuts through the air to corner them, leaving Kevel and Eve with absolutely nowhere left to run from the incoming onslaught. Eve grimaces as sharp feathers slice through the air, realizing they are in a terrible spot. Kevel shields his sister from the aerial bombardment, completely unable to reach their flying attackers, while the smug harpies circle high above, daring the grounded duo to keep running. But the jackal warrior suddenly stops, realizing this is actually the perfect opportunity, casually telling the winged invaders to stay exactly where they are and not come closer, before a sudden, invisible force violently knocks the harpies right out of the sky, sending them crashing face first into the dirt with a satisfying, heavy thud. Our jackal friend calmly notes that targets are useless for magical practice if they get too close, prompting Eve to scream at him for treating a life-or-death battle like a classroom lesson, worrying that his reckless experimentation will inevitably lead to a massive, accidental disaster. Keval and Eve dodge a sudden barrage of sharp feathers raining down from above, as the smug harpy leader mocks them for trying to copy human combat techniques, declaring that he simply will not give the jackal warrior another chance to cast magic. Fruge boasts that absolutely nobody can match the sheer speed of his elite Gale clan, only for one of his flying soldiers to get sniped midair by a tiny projectile, which turns out to be a single harmless berry rolling casually across the dirt, leaving the arrogant harpy leader completely baffled by where the fruit even came from, until a loud, disembodied voice suddenly echoes across the battlefield to yell at Keval. As our boy Ryan furiously lectures his giant mentor for treating this crisis like magic practice, instantly giving away his location and letting the shocked harpy leader know a human is nearby, Fruge frantically looks around for the invisible human, completely losing his mind over the disembodied voice, while Ryan's invisible foot stomps down hard, hoping his distraction bought his allies enough time. Keval's eye narrows as he locks onto his target, ready to capitalize on the opening. And with a massive leap, the jackal warrior drops right out of the sky onto Fruge, leaving the arrogant harpy leader completely paralyzed with fear as Keval looms over him, calmly declaring that their little game has officially come to a very sudden end. This defeated harpy leader groans in pain on the dirt, his wings completely pinned down, before Keval casually turns around to search for Ryan, completely ignoring the defeated enemies. But Fruge refuses to stay down, muttering curses about abominations that dare defy his master, as he desperately launches himself back into the air, swearing he will never accept their existence. Eve clutches her gathered vegetables in shock as a sudden, chilling presence fills the air, before Fruge is violently impaled from behind mid-flight, coughing up blood as his escape is instantly halted. A sharp, pitch-black clawed hand brutally tears right through the arrogant harpy leader's chest, leaving his eyes wide with sheer terror as he weakly mutters his final, trembling words, while a random, lifeless fish suddenly flies through the air in the middle of the chaos, revealing a mysterious, bandaged newcomer standing tall over the defeated and broken harpy squad. This silent, hooded savior keeps their back turned to the group, shrouded in complete mystery, prompting the surviving harpy soldiers to tremble in absolute horror at this overwhelming new threat, as the terrifying newcomer warns them not to take even a single step closer, and Keval can only stare in complete silence as he processes this bizarre turn of events. Ryan gently tugs on Keval's sleeve to get the giant jackal's attention, quietly suggesting that they should probably just pack up and leave right now, pointing out that their defeated attackers are definitely not in any condition to chase them, which actually surprises Keval, who did not expect such mercy from a human. Though the jackal warrior quickly shrugs it off and agrees with the kid's sentiment, while Eve casually admits she was not trying to hide her true form from him, before she abruptly changes the subject to announce they have finally reached their destination, welcoming our young hero to the mysterious and legendary sanctuary known as Convition, asking Ryan what he would do if a non-magical way to regenerate his body existed, promising that this sacred place might hold the key to making his deepest wish come true. Standing among strange, tagged little spirits, Keval quietly agrees with Eve's mysterious proposition, while Ryan gets a deeply unsettling vibe from this supposedly sacred underground sanctuary, sensing that some incredibly massive revelation is about to unfold in the darkness, as they step into a colossal cavern filled with endless rows of stone pillars, revealing a massive, silent cemetery that stretches far into the dark subterranean depths. Keval casually explains that his recent patrol duties left him neglecting his hometown chores, prompting our boy to freeze as he spots something highly suspicious nearby, because a sudden heavy rattling sound echoes from a nearby stone slab, leading them directly to a massive, sealed stone coffin resting in the dirt, which the jackal warrior immediately begins to uncover with his sharp, clawed hands. While Keval diligently works on the soil, Ryan watches his giant mentor with growing curiosity, this jackal warrior softly admitting he is simply glad to have made it back in time. But his sudden mention of returning home leaves our boy feeling incredibly uneasy, until a cheerful voice suddenly calls out to the gravekeeper from across the cemetery, revealing Eve proudly showing off the glowing little plant spirits she has been nurturing, prompting Keval to gently agree, hoping the rest of their garden blooms just as beautifully. She quietly reminds him that this sacred ground holds a deeply personal meaning for them, as Ryan slowly steps forward to break the heavy silence with a burning question, asking his giant companion what exactly is scheduled to take place in this eerie graveyard, leaving Eve to stare back in complete silence as the heavy atmosphere grows even thicker. Keval points out that absolutely nothing is going to change if they just sit around waiting, explaining that their next move depends entirely on the choices they make together right now, which leaves Ryan completely stunned as he realizes his mentor already has a solution for his arm. But the silent jackal warrior simply stares back, letting the heavy tension hang in the air, prompting our boy to demand the full truth behind this sudden, mysterious revelation. Appreciating the kid's quick wits, Keval slowly takes a seat on the cold stone floor, admitting that while time is incredibly short, he needs to get straight to the point, revealing that this underground sanctuary actually holds the secret to fully restoring Ryan's missing limb, a method far simpler than searching through endless magical formulas, though a massive catch remains, because whether Keval actually helps him depends entirely on how the kid answers his next question. Ryan looks Keval dead in the eye, promising to trust him no matter what crazy plan comes next, prompting the Jackal warrior to start explaining the true nature of this underground sanctuary, which turns out to be a massive dumping ground for monsters slain in battle. And as the realization hits, our boy's eyes widen with a sudden, chilling clarity, asking if Keval and his entire tribe were actually born in this literal cemetery. This giant jackal warrior does not even hesitate, giving him a blunt and immediate confirmation, explaining that his soul simply hijacked a dead monster's body, making him a literal walking corpse. Our boy is completely flabbergasted, wondering how such a bizarre biological cheat code is even possible, while Keval casually stares at his own hand, admitting that reanimating dead flesh is indeed pretty weird, meaning his entire kind has always been treated as freaks, even by other monsters. Despite being hated by monsters and humans alike, Keval had no way to change his circumstances, so he decided to find the whole miserable situation incredibly interesting instead, resolving to study the world's laws before his time inevitably runs out. Turns out, gathering power was the only way to protect his family from constant hostility, leading him to make a wild vow to defeat the legendary Monster King himself, leaving Ryan completely speechless at how long his mentor has carried this massive burden. This tyrannical Monster King had united his kind to wipe out humanity once and for all, with absolutely nobody daring to question his genocidal crusade except for Keval's small tribe, who could not understand why monsters and humans could not simply coexist without endless bloodshed, believing that peace is entirely possible if they can just end this pointless war. Keval realized the only way to stop the endless cycle was to cut out the source entirely, but while he was still planning his move, the mighty Monster King Rajua was suddenly defeated by humans, leaving the Jackal warrior completely shocked since that beast was an absolute peak powerhouse. And from that fateful day onward, the entire balance of power completely flipped in humanity's favor. This sudden shift forced the underground tribes to live in constant, trembling fear of human retaliation, as human armies began invading deeper underground, forcing Keval to take up arms to protect his family, which is exactly when he discovered a very harsh truth about his new opponents. Realizing these human invaders had somehow unlocked an incredibly terrifying power of their own, a young mage named Jean desperately unleashes her spells, only to realize they do not even scratch him, forcing the terrified human squad to scrap their mission and call for an immediate frantic retreat. Keval watched in absolute awe as the human's strange technique suddenly vanished into thin air, sparking a deep, obsessive longing inside him to master that incredible power for himself, though the human invaders mysteriously stopped showing up in their territory for quite some time, leaving him to wonder if he would ever get another chance to unlock that world-changing strength, until a sudden, unexpected disturbance in the sanctuary caught everyone completely off guard, revealing a very familiar, pointy wizard's hat lying abandoned on the cold stone floor, which is exactly how the giant jackal warrior finally crossed paths with our boy Ryan. Recognizing a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, Keval knew he absolutely could not let the kid escape, prompting Ryan to realize he was basically set up just to be a walking magic textbook, while Keval casually defends his extreme methods by claiming he is just naturally clumsy. Our boy can only offer a sarcastic apology for being a reckless idiot without any survival instincts, but watching a kid value his own life so little actually helped Keval make up his mind, resolving to officially team up with Ryan and completely change the fate of their entire world. This sudden declaration leaves the young mage completely speechless as he processes the massive weight of those words, which is exactly why the Jackal warrior decided to bring him to this sanctuary to restore his missing arm, though a rather massive problem still stands in the way of their grand, world-changing partnership, because being Keval's personal friend does not automatically make Ryan an ally to the rest of monsterkind. If the kid plans to use his restored arm to hunt down other beasts, it goes completely against his mentor's wishes, prompting Ryan to realize that their separation back when the giant boulder crashed down was no accident, accusing the jackal of leaving him alone on a monster path to test his willingness to avoid conflict. Keval sheepishly admits he got caught, while Eve points out his test was painfully obvious. This little spirit keeps roasting the giant jackal for making up excuses just to show off, but the fact remains that our boy successfully reached the sanctuary without shedding a single drop of blood, prompting his mentor to ask if he truly understands the weight of this peaceful achievement, declaring that Ryan officially has what it takes to become the ultimate savior of their world. Since they have already stirred up trouble, there is absolutely no time left to waste, as Keval vows that they will defeat the legendary Rajua and bring true harmony to everyone, offering to immediately restore the kid's missing arm if he agrees to join this wild crusade. Hearing this massive, world-altering proposal, our young hero can only hesitate in deep, conflicted silence, before quietly admitting that carrying the weight of the entire world is simply too much for him. Ryan admits he has never once considered carrying the weight of the entire world, explaining that his actual motives for reclaiming his arm are far more selfish, because his ultimate goal has absolutely nothing to do with saving humanity. shouting that he simply wants to do something incredible and get showered in praise. This sudden outburst triggers a painful memory of a gentle knock on his door, where a kind shopkeeper politely asked a younger Ryan for some quick help, reassuring the clumsy kid not to worry about the plate he broke earlier. But our boy had coldly snapped back, demanding to be left completely alone. This stunned shopkeeper could only watch as the boy retreated into his shell. Believing that isolating himself from society was the only way to avoid being ridiculed, everything changed when he met his master, who introduced him to the wonderful world of magic, inspiring him to believe that true strength meant handling absolutely everything on his own. A stubborn mindset that only made him more impatient as he slowly lost his grip, wandering down a dark, isolated path with his head held low. Until he finally ended up in a terrifying situation he could not possibly handle alone. But just when all hope seemed lost, Keval reached out and guided him forward, which is why Ryan deeply respects his mentor's peaceful vision for the world, even if he still feels completely unworthy of standing alongside such noble creatures, shouting that a selfish brat who only cared about himself could never save the world. Because achieving something that grand is simply beyond what his remaining hand can reach. Ryan points out that if he actually succeeded, everyone would shower him with praise, but he admits his inability to even picture success is proof of his own weakness, believing a weakling like him could never live up to Keval's massive expectations. Instead of being disappointed, the giant jackal warrior suddenly lets out a booming laugh, cheerfully declaring that our boy has once again completely shattered his expectations, leaving the young mage utterly bewildered by this bizarrely positive reaction to his self-pity. Keval gently points out that acknowledging his own weakness is actually a massive strength, because it means he possesses the ultimate drive to grow and improve, proving he has the exact mindset required of a hero who can bring real change. Since being weak is not the real issue, but rather having the courage to change, Ryan admits he desperately wants to get stronger, though he still doubts he is the right guy. But Keval immediately shuts down that self-doubt with a blunt two-word reality check, extending his massive clawed hand to remind the kid of a very crucial detail, pointing out that the two of them are actually the ultimate dream team. Turns out, our boy was the one who originally claimed they were a perfect match, prompting a genuine, relieved smile to finally break across the young mage's face, as he firmly grasps his mentor's hand, ready to face whatever madness lies ahead, believing that with this giant jackal by his side, his impossible dreams might actually come true, leaving him feeling completely safe and secure for the first time in his life, until Keval's head is suddenly sliced clean off his shoulders in a brutal, split-second ambush. Ryan stands completely frozen as a sudden, terrifying chill sweeps through the dark cavern, his eyes widening in sheer disbelief as he struggles to process the sudden horror, when a creepy, slender shadow suddenly emerges from the darkness to claim the kill, stepping forward on sharp, bird-like talons that click ominously against the cold stone floor, revealing a tattered, bloody wing that apparently never healed properly from a past battle, leaving our boy screaming in absolute horror as his mentor's body collapses beside him. This mysterious killer only lets out a mocking, high-pitched giggle at the kid's despair, showing off a crazed, avian face before promising to end Ryan's life next, which triggers a sudden memory of a fierce battle between a human warrior and a beast, prompting a weary observer to let out a long, deeply exhausted sigh at the chaos. A massive fire-breathing beast suddenly lunges forward, forcing a young human warrior to dodge backward, while a red-haired mage casually watches the chaos unfold with a bored, lazy smile, sitting comfortably on a nearby rock while the battle rages on right in front of her. Remembering how her ally had strictly warned her not to interfere in his fight, she can only sigh in mild disappointment, wishing she could join in on the action. Meanwhile, two beast warriors watch the intense duel from a safe distance, whispering in hushed tones, wondering if they should jump in to help their struggling comrade defeat the human invader. But the sheer, overwhelming power of the red-haired mage keeps them completely frozen in place. They realize that crossing paths with someone that dangerous is a literal death sentence, prompting the bored mage to suddenly turn around and suggest a much more entertaining game. She smugly explains that if they look away from their opponent for even a second, they lose, flashing a cheerful, mockingly sweet grin as if this deadly game is just harmless fun, which immediately sends the wolf beast warrior into a fit of pure snarling rage. But she casually points out that this setup keeps everyone perfectly honest and focused. After all, she claims she has absolutely no interest in bullying opponents who will not fight back, prompting the dragon-like beast to unleash a massive torrent of scorching fire, forcing the young human warrior to barely dodge by diving behind a solid stone pillar, locking his gaze onto his target as the beast prepares for another deadly strike, before suddenly leaping forward with his sword drawn to catch the monster completely off guard, driving his blade straight ahead with absolute precision to end this chaotic duel. This young warrior grits his teeth as the dragon-like beast glares back with pure malice, unleashing a blindingly fast sword slash that cuts clean through the empty air, only for the agile monster to easily slip away while mocking his slow reflexes, leaving our swordsman wondering if this loudmouth actually has the skills to back up his trash talk. This cocky dragon-like beast simply laughs, boasting about how many pathetic humans he has personally slaughtered. confidently declaring that a weakling like him stands absolutely zero chance of cutting him down, before unleashing another massive wave of scorching flames that forces the kid to scramble for cover, closing the distance in a flash to tear his opponent apart with razor-sharp claws, while the red-haired mage quietly watches the brutal exchange from the sidelines without moving a muscle, knowing that surviving countless deadly battlefields is the only true measure of a warrior's strength. Chris gasps for breath, pointing out that their actual combat experience is on a completely different level. But the stubborn monster merely scoffs, claiming that such trivial details do not matter to him. Our young swordsman coldly reminds him that the war between humans and monsters is already over, explaining that their legendary leader, the Hellfire Lion, was slain by humans 4 years ago, leaving only a few desperate remnants to defend the underground while others foolishly raid the surface, prompting Chris to grit his teeth in pure, unadulterated frustration at their pointless resistance. He fiercely demands their surrender, screaming that their useless struggles are only causing innocent people to die, as a painful memory of a fallen comrade suddenly flashes through his mind, wondering why his close friend had to lose his life in this endless, stupid conflict. While the red-haired mage quietly approaches, asking if our young swordsman is actually doing okay, Chris leans against a tree, bleeding from his face, and insists Jean treat their ally first, pleading with her to prioritize his friend's severe injuries over his own minor scratches. Jean simply tells him to shut up and stay completely still while she works, while her animal companion and a small spirit watch the exchange with worried expressions. Meanwhile, the dragon-like beast chuckles mockingly from a distance, completely unfazed by Chris's speech. This monster lets out a low, guttural growl as he processes the human's bold words, sneering that they are incredibly delusional to think Lord Rajua could ever be defeated so easily. Chris looks up in absolute shock, his eyes widening as the monster's words sink in, before the beast suddenly lunges forward, roaring that this war will never end until every human is dead, clicking his tongue in annoyance as he prepares to crush his stubborn, weak opponents once and for all. This dragon-like beast unleashes a massive torrent of fire, screaming at Chris to drop dead already. But our young swordsman merely narrows his eyes, realizing his golden opportunity has finally arrived, standing his ground against the blazing heat as the monster continues its relentless assault, locking his gaze onto his target with absolute focus, refusing to back down even an inch. A massive stream of scorching fire rains down, threatening to incinerate everything in its path, while Jean quietly observes the deadly clash, completely confident in her ally's tactical instincts, because she knows he has been patiently waiting for this exact opening all along. Turns out, the cocky monster believes his fire-breathing technique makes him completely invincible, boasting that absorbing and manipulating these flames gives him total control over the battlefield. Unaware that the split second he finishes exhaling leaves him completely open to a fatal strike, this dragon-like beast narrows his eyes in absolute fury, realizing his secret weakness has been exposed. But Chris is already lunging forward, his blade cutting through the fading embers of the flame, catching the monster completely off guard as he closes the distance before the fire can even clear, prompting the giant beast to let out a booming laugh, welcoming the direct head-on clash. Confident that a human's flimsy sword could never pierce his incredibly thick armored hide, but our young swordsman merely smirks, channeling a massive surge of magical energy into his hilt, unleashing a devastating ice enchantment that instantly coats his blade in a freezing aura. This sudden burst of freezing energy leaves the nearby beast spectators completely frozen in sheer shock, while Jean casually points toward the battlefield, smugly declaring that the match is already over, leaving the dragon-like beast completely encased in solid ice, unable to do anything but curse his opponent. This freezing ice begins to crack and shatter with a sharp, echoing sound, while Chris stares down at the frozen beast, his face covered in sweat and blood, demanding to know exactly where Ryan is hiding before this monster completely shatters. This dragon-like beast merely roars in defiance, refusing to let a human look down on him. But his frozen shell suddenly bursts apart as a massive shockwave rips through his body, sending the defeated monster crashing hard against the cold stone floor. Chris drops to his knees in exhaustion, weakly thanking Jean as she casually approaches him, while the red-haired mage flashes a playful, cheerful grin, completely amused by the dramatic finish, teasingly apologizing for stepping in and stealing the spotlight right at the very end, prompting the exhausted swordsman to quietly apologize for causing her so much extra trouble. Chris grips his sword tightly, realizing his ice spell barely scratched the monster's thick armor, looking up at Jean with a bloody face while promising to do much better next time, which only prompts the red-haired mage to tell him to stop overthinking and sit down for healing, gently touching his bruised cheek to remind him that even her magic has its limits. She softly explains that magic is not some miracle cure that can solve every single problem, leaving our young swordsman to quietly apologize for constantly making her worry about him, until we cut to Chris walking down a quiet street, thinking about Jean's drinking habits. He enters a local tavern only to find the red-haired mage completely passed out at a table, snoring softly surrounded by empty bottles while the bartender just shrugs at the sight, leaving our boy to sigh in mild amusement at his mentor's chaotic way of unwinding. Gently pulling his collar straight, Jean finishes patching up our young swordsman's battle-worn gear, leaving Chris staring down at his sleeping mentor with a quiet, fierce vow to protect her. But the moment she wakes up, she cheerfully announces his outfit is fully repaired, prompting Chris to ask if the rumors about their supposedly dead enemy leader are actually true. She casually stretches and calls it a total bluff, completely ruining the dramatic tension. As they begin walking back, hoping these underground beasts never threaten the surface again, until a sudden, terrifying realization flashes across the red-haired mage's face as she stops dead in her tracks, because they just realized they knocked out every single monster without asking where Ryan is. Our young swordsman immediately starts yelling, pointing out he only froze the beast to keep him alive, forcing the legendary mage to awkwardly apologize for completely ruining their only lead. A distant, desperate voice echoes through the cavern, calling out for Ryan in vain, only to find nothing but fresh blood splattered across the cold stone floor. As a smug, winged beast warrior mockingly notes that their efforts are completely pathetic, casually lifting a battered young boy by the throat to end his life, leaving the helpless kid gritting his teeth as he struggles to breathe. Realizing with absolute horror that his journey might actually end right here, while the cruel monster simply sneers, thoroughly enjoying the boy's desperate struggle, telling him he can think about his failures once he is dead, before unleashing a barrage of razor-sharp feathers straight at his face, forcing the exhausted kid to shield his face from the lethal onslaught. Ryan winces in sheer agony as the sharp feathers slice across his face, crashing heavily onto the cold stone floor while his companion desperately calls his name. This winged beast warrior looks back, casually noting that the kid's movements are completely off, prompting the monster to narrow his eyes, determined to finish off his target once and for all. Meanwhile, Ryan sits in the dark, his mind spinning as his battered body refuses to move, staring blankly into the shadows while blood slowly drips down his pale face. Confused by the kid's resilience, the winged beast warrior wonders how he survived, especially after learning that their powerful ally Kevel has already been completely wiped out. Up on a ledge, a small masked spirit groans, deeply regretting its own foolish carelessness, which immediately prompts Ryan to yell in frustration, having genuinely believed his little friend was dead. Our opponent explains that a living corpse possesses a body far tougher than any normal monster. Switching topics, the winged warrior mentions being forced to consume a massive dose of a strange substance, revealing that he personally threw this volatile compound directly into the helpless Toposhi settlement, which leaves Ryan utterly horrified as he realizes that devastating fire actually belonged to Lord Rajua. This smug monster warns the kid to watch his tone when speaking of their legendary king, declaring that the name of Rajua is practically synonymous with a literal god. He asks the trembling boy why their supreme leader stands unchallenged at the absolute top, explaining that the legendary king has completely conquered death, a concept feared by all living creatures, granting his chosen followers an overwhelming power to reject mortality and regenerate from any fatal wound, meaning that reviving through his sacred flames is a divine privilege reserved only for the elite. Ryan stares in utter disbelief, realizing this insane power completely transcends the limits of normal magic, while the winged beast warrior merely sighs, deciding to use this opportunity to ask a serious question, looking down at the small masked spirit to ask what exactly these living corpses are supposed to be. He recalls a time when Lord Rajua explained that these creatures would not die from ordinary attacks, but rather the sacred flames of their king would actually act as a deadly poison to them, prompting the masked spirit to tilt its head, casually asking what the warrior is even trying to say. This winged warrior completely loses his temper, screaming that the spirit's attitude is incredibly disrespectful, ranting about how he has been patiently waiting for the perfect moment to eliminate these intruders. While the small masked spirit calmly points out that there is not a single flame anywhere in sight, dryly asking why the warrior showed up completely empty-handed if he actually wanted to kill them. Ryan flashes a confident smirk, asking his little masked friend if he can actually heal Kevel, prompting the spirit to nod in agreement, though it warns that recovery will take some time, leaving our boy to tighten his fist behind his back, telling his companion to leave everything to him. This small masked spirit looks down in shame, quietly apologizing for constantly relying on the kid's help, but Ryan simply grins through the blood on his face, declaring this is exactly what he wanted. This winged beast warrior bursts into a mocking laugh, suddenly asking the human to join their side, pointing out the kid's severe injuries while offering a chance at survival if he swears absolute loyalty, promising that he can personally ask Lord Rajua to completely heal the boy's shattered arm. Our young hero remains completely silent, staring back with a cold, unimpressed expression, before stepping forward to decline the offer, dryly noting that he already has a prior engagement. Ryan sticks his tongue out in pure defiance, completely mocking the winged warrior's high and mighty attitude. This winged warrior chuckles darkly in response, realizing this stubborn kid will not be easily broken. Suddenly, the monster's smug composure completely shatters as he roars in absolute fury at the insult. Meanwhile, the small masked spirit sneaks away to gather its detached head and body in secret, calling out to his tiny bell-like companion to quickly help him piece himself back together. As the magical seals begin to glow, the spirit prepares to unleash a massive burst of energy, fully restoring his true form to intervene in the battle before Ryan gets completely pulverized. Our young hero does not waste a single second, lunging forward to strike while the enemy is distracted, unleashing a specialized expansion spell that turns a tiny pebble into a massive, crushing boulder. But the agile monster easily evades the heavy projectile, instantly counterattacking with a lethal blade. Ryan grits his teeth as the enemy's blade shatters against his defensive barrier, leaving the winged beast warrior to casually mock the boy's surprisingly stubborn defense. while our young hero stands his ground, panting heavily as his magical shield crumbles away. Meanwhile, the small masked spirit looks back in concern, asking if Ryan can actually survive this, while his companion points out that the kid has already pushed his body way past its limits, leaving Ryan standing with blood dripping down his face, his breathing shallow and ragged. This winged warrior mockingly asks if the boy has any energy left for a final defense, leaving our young hero to silently contemplate his options in this seemingly hopeless situation, until a sudden glowing feather floats past his face, catching him completely off guard, sparking a sudden realization in Ryan's mind as he prepares to make his final stand. Ryan channels his remaining energy, unleashing his sixth style to manipulate the battlefield, sending a flurry of invisible, sharp trajectories slicing directly toward his airborne opponent, which forces the winged warrior to dodge a path he absolutely cannot predict. But the smug monster barely manages to escape the attack with only a single severed feather. Glaring down at our boy, the beast warns him not to underestimate a god-chosen elite, before delivering a brutal, lightning-fast counterattack that leaves Ryan coughing up fresh blood. Watching this hopeless beatdown from the shadows, a black cat-like spirit trembles in absolute horror, as her companion desperately holds her back, warning her that intervening is far too dangerous. Yet she refuses to stand by and watch Ryan get hurt any further, pleading with her friend to let her go so she can save him before it is too late. This winged beast warrior lands gracefully back down on the cold stone floor, staring down at his battered opponent with an incredibly smug, mocking gaze, before casually lifting our exhausted young hero by the throat once again, muttering that spilling blood the same old way is getting a bit boring, leaving Ryan gasping for air as the monster's grip tightens around his neck. Our young hero's vision begins to blur while the beast tells him to struggle harder, forcing the helpless kid to wonder why he is still so incredibly weak. Meanwhile, the small masked spirit successfully pieces his shattered body back together, recalling the solemn promise they made to protect each other no matter what, prompting him to reach out to his tiny companion to prepare their next move. Her tiny companion desperately warns Eve that jumping into this fight is way too dangerous, but she simply tells him to shut up, her mind completely made up, boldly declaring that if they want to stop her, they will have to use actual force, leaving her companion struggling to move as his newly repaired body refuses to cooperate, while Eve silently apologizes to her brother for disobeying his direct orders, because she has her own reasons for risking her life in this battle, and she refuses to let their journey end in this dark cavern, remembering how Ryan was always at his absolute best whenever they fought side by side. With a fierce battle cry, she leaps high into the air to ambush the winged warrior, crashing down on the startled monster to force him to release his grip on Ryan. Eve jams a toxic plant secretion right into the winged warrior's eye, making him scream in agony. Before he can recover, she casually slices off her own arm and tosses it toward Ryan, leaving the blinded monster clutching his face in absolute agony as she retreats. Meanwhile, our battered hero collapses onto the dirt, barely holding onto consciousness while the enemy groans. Ryan slowly opens his eyes, completely stunned by the bizarre turn of events unfolding before him, only to see Eve pointing at her freshly severed limb and telling him to use it, which leaves the kid utterly speechless as he stares at the black arm lying on the ground. She explains that while they usually harvest parts from the graveyard to patch people up, desperate times call for desperate measures, meaning he needs to attach her arm to his body, prompting Ryan to look down at his own bandaged, useless limb as the magical seals glow. Ryan stares at the severed limb, questioning if grafting a monster's arm is actually a good idea. But the tiny masked spirit frantically tells him to stop overthinking and just do it, especially since the blinded winged warrior is already starting to recover from his agonizing injury. With the clock ticking down, the spirit screams at our boy to make a choice, prompting Ryan to lock his gaze forward as absolute determination washes over his face. He presses the dark limb against his shoulder, shouting for the spirit to begin the fusion, which instantly triggers a blinding flash of magic as the flesh begins to bind together, leaving the confused winged warrior to blink through his pain, wondering what just happened. Suddenly, a newly formed clawed hand slams into the dirt, pulsing with an unnatural strength, while the bandaged spirit collapses nearby, frustrated that his own body still refuses to cooperate. Kevel looks on in absolute shock, whispering the names of his two reckless companions. Meanwhile, Ryan's feet plant firmly onto the cracked ground as a massive surge of energy erupts, dark smoke billowing from his shoulder as the foreign limb successfully fuses with his body. This bizarre transformation leaves both Kevel and Eve staring in absolute jaw-dropped disbelief, while our boy clenches his newly acquired clawed fist, feeling the raw power surging through his veins, before looking up to offer his friends a sincere thank you for keeping him alive.